Good evening. Welcome to Half Moon Bay City Council meeting of April 21st. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Reddick?
Here.
Councilmember Muller?
Here.
Councilmember Penrose?
Here.
Vice Mayor Paulson?
Here.
Mayor Fraser?
Here. Would you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have several proclamations and presentations this evening, and the first one will be for the West Nile Virus Awareness Program, and I would like to invite Ms. Peavy to the podium. City of Half Moon Bay is proclaiming the week of April 19th to 25 the West Nile Virus Mosquito and Vector Control Awareness Week. West Nile virus is a mosquito-borne disease that has sickened 798 Californians, 543 of which developed severe neuroinvasive disease and 29 whom died. This is nearly twice the number of cases that occurred in 2013 and the highest number of cases in California since 2005. So as you can see, this is a very serious situation, and we do have a committee that takes care of that, and I will have Ms. Peavy tell you a little bit more about this, and that's why we're proclaiming and honoring this week to raise awareness, and perhaps you can share with us some of the things people can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Fraser and members of the City Council. I'm the manager of San Mateo County Mosquito and Vector Control District, and we appreciate the proclamation. We wanted to bring to everybody's attention that we're just at the very beginning of West Nile virus season, and the important thing we need from citizens is to call us if they find a dead bird, particularly a dead crow, and our phone number is 650-344-8592. We also do mosquito control. We do larval control throughout the entire county using bacterial materials in standing water. And our entire program is focused on preventing mosquitoes from emerging to the adult stage. We also can answer questions about rats and other kinds of vectors. Are there any questions for me?
Now, if people haven't written down that phone number, if your neighbor or someone hears that they think they have, or they find a dead bird, what's the easiest way to get a hold of your agency? Is that the county's website? What's a quick way?
No, we're an independent special district, so we have a website, which is our initials, which is SMCMVCD, and that stands for San Mateo County Mosquito Vector Control District, and then it's .org.
Now, with the drought, there's not a lot of people that do have, pools of water laying around, but for those that do have fountains, are you discouraging people from having any water in their fountains right now?
No, not at this time. Actually, if you call us, we can put mosquito fish in fountains, and that way the mosquito fish can control the mosquitoes. Our biggest problem with the drought is that there's also a lot of water underground, underneath houses, or in storm drains, or groundwater that's just standing underneath houses. And that water stays there throughout the summer and it's standing. So that's a big source of mosquitoes. Oddly enough, when you have a drought, you actually have more West Nile virus, partly because it's hotter, also because the water is concentrated, and the birds and the mosquitoes tend to be all in one spot.
Council, any questions?
Just a comment, I'd like to link our website to that website as well, so we can go to Half Moon Bay website.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. So I can send something to the city clerk. In case you haven't got a link, I'll send a link to you.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes, I have a bird bath. Can I put mosquito fish in there and it'd be okay for the birds?
The fish will probably die because probably the water dries up every few days. I don't know if there's always water in there.
We try to keep it wet, but
Oh, okay. If there's always water in it, then you could put fish and it won't hurt, the birds won't hurt the birds and the birds won't hurt the fish.
okay, thanks.
Otherwise, if you're changing the water once a week, that would be fine too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just before I go, I just wanted to thank you for sending Katie Martin to us, our trustee for the city of Half Moon Bay. She's been doing a great job and she has lots of penetrating questions and she participates actively in the board.
Thank you for saying that. We do have the appointment on our agenda this evening, and Katie has been an enthusiastic community member in that and helping out. So I know that the district's gone through a lot of changes, but you guys have done a great job in rebranding and straightening the house out. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have a lot of internal controls now, and I was hired on March 1st, so I think I'm optimistic about it going further into the future.
Great, thank you. And next up, we have a presentation from our recent Woman of the Year of San Mateo County, Kellex Nelson, who her day job is the Resource Conservation District Director. And Kellex has some good information she wants to share with us this evening.
Is it up there? Thanks. Oh, okay, thank you. Hello, thank you for having me. I am going to talk with you a little bit tonight about the Resource Conservation District in San Mateo County, also known more commonly as the RCD, which I think is probably one of the best kept secrets in San Mateo County. And we are a strong partner to the city and to folks who live here in both conservation and agriculture. The Resource Conservation District was established as a special district under State Public Resources Code in 1939. There was about 100 RCDs in the state of California. The very first was formed here 75 years ago by pretty visionary farmers in San Mateo County. And we have a board of directors that are appointed by the County Board of Supervisors and an operating budget that is about a $57,000 a year tax base, property tax base. And the rest is grant funded. And so I just want to put that picture in there to show you how long we've been around in Half Moon Bay. You can see our old offices there on Main Street, and we continue to be in Half Moon Bay today. So what we do is we help people help the land. We are a non-regulatory public agency that provides technical assistance. We help with project implementation. We do planning, education, outreach, and we do literally everything in partnership. We don't acquire land, we don't do advocacy work, we don't do litigation. We kind of boots on the ground, getting projects done is how we get our work done. All work done by RCDs across the nation actually is non-regulatory and free to our constituents. This is really essential to having the confidence of both public and private landowners so we can get some really valuable conservation work done on those lands. These are the priorities that we're largely addressing right now. Water supply, the drought, water quality issues, water conservation. We do a lot of habitat restoration, invasive weed management. With climate, we deal a lot with energy efficiency, carbon sequestration, resiliency to climate change, et cetera. And our roots, and a lot of our work today is still in erosion control and managing sediment. And as I mentioned before, we were formed by farmers. We are rooted in agriculture. We work a lot at the nexus of agriculture and conservation. We also work in the subdivided and urban areas in a watershed approach. And we also host the county-funded agricultural ombudsman position to help farmers and ranchers with some of the assistance that they need. The environmental improvements that we make work for agriculture's business model. So everything we do is a win-win. I'm going to highlight a couple projects for you, and then I'll wrap up. One of our large program areas has to do with water quality. Water quality is a big issue on the coast. We have a robust program that includes water quality monitoring and making improvements on the landscape to improve and protect water quality. One of the projects that we did that was larger, you might be more familiar with, is the study that we conducted of the bacterial contamination of Pillar Point Harbor. In this picture, you can see the neon green and pink. That's when we dyed the harbor to study the effects of circulation on how bacteria is transported. One of our water quality monitoring programs, First Flush, is partly funded by the city through your joint powers agreement with the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. Another big program area for us has to do with water conservation and water storage. In fact, what is now Rocket Farms, formerly Nurserymen's Exchange, won the Silicon Valley Water Conservation Awards for water recycling and water conservation projects that they did with us. And actually from that project, they ceased to be Coast County Water District's #1 customer. We've also been involved with a fair amount of watershed planning, trying to balance competing demands on very limited resources. We have endangered fish, we have domestic needs for water, we have agriculture, all dependent, for example, on the Pilarcitos watershed that runs through town here. And we oversaw the development of the Pilarcitos watershed plan. The city was a signatory to that MOU and participates in the restoration work group that we coordinate. We do a great deal of habitat restoration, often in creeks, often in uplands, but trying to ensure that some of the threatened and endangered wildlife around here continues to flourish. That's an example of one project where we removed a dam that formed a barrier to endangered salmon being able to reach tens of miles of ancestral spawning habitat. We're very involved in education and outreach with children and adults in English and in Spanish, with out in the field, in offices, on ranches, you name it, on a wide range of resource-related issues. And we're also involved in wildfire prevention. We partnered with CAL FIRE on developing the Community Wildfire Protection Plan that covers the coast, identifying where there are high risks of wildfire and enabling this community to be eligible for certain types of federal funding to minimize that risk. In addition to undertaking projects demonstration projects such as this one, where there's a high fuel load adjacent to a residential subdivision, and we reduce that fuel load substantially. And so that is a little overview of our programs. Basically, I'd say in a nutshell, the RCD is working to protect what we love here on the coast without regulations, doing it through voluntary conservation and entirely free, actually, to our constituents and our customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelix, and thank you for all your work. I have been aware of many of the programs you had, with the exception of the wildfire area. I think that's outstanding. What are some of the successes that you've had with some of the trout, bringing them back? What particular creeks have you been working on?
Well, the biggest success right now actually is not within the boundaries of the city of Half Moon Bay. This year, spawning endangered coho salmon were found in Mainstem Pescadero Creek. This is a really, really big deal. These are fish that are on the very verge of local extinction, and the fact that they actually successfully spawned this year is pretty exciting. Pilarcitos watershed that goes through the city of Half Moon Bay is home to steelhead trout, and we've been able to remove a number of barriers to fish passage and work with SFPUC and other partners on restoring stream flow to the creek to make sure there's adequate water for all who are interested, and working with a number of the agricultural interests on water conservation so that there's enough water for agriculture and for the fish.
Yeah. Questions?
You do great stuff, and everything
Thank
that's
you.
old is new again.
Yeah.
Your organization starts out, helping farmers with soils, and now the watershed approach is really coming into its own, and you're going to be right there at the forefront, a wonderful local partner. And I would love to have the RCD back to provide a workshop on agricultural lands as part of the general plan update process, to talk about where we have prime soils and help us prioritize the protection of agricultural lands.
Thank you.
So this is very helpful, but I'd love to tap your resources in the general plan update as well.
Thank you. We would definitely welcome that. One of the things, partially through the agricultural ombudsman position, is we have been able to identify some of the differences between county regulations and support for agriculture and City of Half Moon Bay regulations and support for agriculture, and where there might be some best practices that could be shared.
That would be wonderful. Thanks.
Council, any other questions?
Quick comment. So And the other thing, just to mention that through the sewer authority, we're going to set funds aside to monitor the water outlets from the city of Half Moon Bay. We already monitor them in the harbor and other areas, but we need to include Half Moon Bay in that process. So that's something we'll budget for at SAM, and that'll come back to this council.
Thanks so much, Kellex.
Thank you.
And next, we will have a presentation from the Boys and Girls Club on the Coastside and Half Moon Bay Parks and Recreation Program. And Georgia, you're going to be up first.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Georgia Antonopoulos, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Boys and Girls Club of the Coastside. And I wanted to first acknowledge that we have board members for the Boys and Girls Club in the room tonight, and I wanted them to just wave or stand up. If you're in the room and you represent the board, please stand up, or would be great. And I'd also like to, I think, very importantly, acknowledge the staff of the recreation program. We have Mike Ride in the room, and we have Julio Serrano as well, and I believe Flori Lukidis is also in the room. And they're really important to this building in particular because they manage all of the activities that flow in and out of the recreation department for the city of Half Moon Bay. So they're the face of the recreation division, and we're really proud of the work that they do. And we're here to talk to you about that tonight. I'd also like to thank all of you, the City Council, the staff, for giving us the floor tonight because we're really proud of the partnership that we have with you. And I'd like to give a little special shout out to Alex because you conceived of a really unique public and nonprofit partnership that I think, you know, in all of the research we've done across the country, there are not many Boys and Girls Clubs and cities that partner up to deliver services like this. It's very unique, and so far it's been very successful. So our goals for the presentation, the overarching goals, and the overarching goal is really to give you a snapshot of where we are and how we've gotten this partnership up and running and the successes to date. In the process, I would like to give you a little bit of a context of the club and what we do. I also want to kind of give you a few of our statistics around successes and give you sort of touch on the future and what we envision for our future partnership. It also occurred to me that it might be good to tell you what the conclusion of the presentation will be in case, you know, this presentation may be a little longer than you'd like, so in case we don't get there. The conclusion really is, the upshot is that, you know, since we've taken over management of the recreation division under this new partnership, we have more diverse classes being offered, registrations are up, rentals are up, and basically life at the Ted Adcock Community Center is pretty happy for all involved. So that's the conclusion. If we don't get there, that's really the message that we're trying to drive home today. But we will walk you through this presentation. So in terms of the Boys and Girls Club, this is where we're at today. As many of you know, we've grown significantly in a short time. Just over a year ago, we were one classroom in a middle school. And now, all of this growth has occurred. We've tripled our middle school site. We have a new teen center right here, thanks to this partnership. We'll be breaking ground on a new facility that's a partnership with the Cabrillo Unified School District that will be a multi-use facility for the entire coastside. It's truly a gift to the entire coastside, not just a gymnasium, also a place to convene a performing arts center. And we have assumed management for Parks and Recreation. Our soccer, surf, and other affiliated programs are growing, and we also have a skate plaza project that's underway as well. We wouldn't be taking on all of these partnerships and ambitious projects if there wasn't a strong mission fit, and there really is. Yes, youth are they're at the core of everything we do. We happen to believe that creating strong and healthy communities means that we can ensure the future of our youth, which is why we're so invested in all these programs. Another really essential feature of a Boys and Girls Club in particular is the physical facility. There are after-school programs across the nation, but this emphasis on a physical space is pretty unique to the Boys and Girls Club movement. And that's why we're particularly invested in all of these facilities projects, because having a safe space for youth and community members to go is really critical. And that brings us to our teen center. Because of this great partnership, we were able to open that teen center. And we opened in October, we had the ribbon cutting in November, and we have over 100 youth that are already registered. And they're in there right now. They were in there when you arrived. And they're involved in financial management classes, they're involved in career readiness courses, they're involved in all these things that I think are kind of cool. But the things that they think are really cool are just the fact that they get to come, hang out with peers, and be around caring adults. And that's what they really care about, and that's what we're offering them. This is, you can see that this campus is kind of emerging, and I think we've been really strategic in the way we've grown the Boys and Girls Club campus to make these programs and activities really accessible to all in a very easy, safe, convenient way. And you can see with the new facility and with the partnership with Parks and Rec, all of that is coming together very nicely. And for those of you that haven't seen the sketches of the new facility and the skate park, it's really important that they've been designed to blend seamlessly into the community and that they're not imposing structures, and we believe we've done a good job with that as well. So you've heard me talk about partnerships and community probably, I don't know how many times I've said those words, but it really is at the core of everything we do, and that's why we think we make an ideal partner for the City of Half Moon Bay recreation program managers. This slide here is more for your reference. It's a pretty dense slide, but it kind of outlines our track record of partnerships in terms of our close relationship with the school district. Excuse me. The other thing it does is it touches on our financial stewardship. So we take very seriously the fact that we are stewards for the funds that the city invests in recreation, whether it be the $20,000 that you provide to us to create an activity guide, which is on your seats. You'll see. Very proud of this. It came out today. It's hot off the presses. So we make sure that this gets out to the entire community with your support. We have learned lessons from the previous management. Everybody has their struggles, and we were able to learn from previous management struggles, and some of the struggles of the previous management in terms of running recreation. You know, it was a different city or a different town that was managing Parks and Recreation. So there was a little bit of community engagement that was missing, a little bit of the buy-in from the community that was missing. Also, we saw that there was an opportunity to increase the diversity of programs, the classes. What we've done is we've secured bilingual capability for classes and rental inquiries. We've kept classes on the coast. We stopped having people go over the hill for classes. That's been a big change. So we've been pretty strategic in identifying solutions to some of those challenges. And the results are in, and they're looking good. We've got, our registrations are up. We're projecting for 2015 to have over doubled the number of registrations for our classes, which is really awesome. Our class success rate has also dramatically improved. The way we define class success, people define it differently, is that when we offer a course in this catalog, you know, is there enough interest? Is the course actually, do people sign up for it, and do we see it all the way through? And in 2013, 2014, you had a 25% class success rate. We're up to 80%, and that's another really dramatic improvement and something we're proud of. If we're guilty of anything, it's that we're overachievers, and you've contracted us to keep office open for 15 hours a week, and we've exceeded, we have it open 40 plus hours. And that's really a testament to the fact that the board and the staff of the Boys and Girls Club really are invested in this, and this is really about the community. They see the big picture. It's about offering great programs for the community, so we don't want to stop at what the contract says. We're pushing, and you know, I think it's been worth it. Again, the activity guide is another way that we reach the community. One thing that we're hoping to do is offer it a bilingual activity guide. And we're going to be working closely with the city on that. One thing that we do is, just because, you know, the Boys and Girls Club is here, doesn't mean we actually go out of our way to feature other nonprofits in here and their activities. So the YMCA is featured in here. So many different partners are featured in here. These partners are really important to us, so I just wanted to list them for you. These are some of our partners: Project HEAL, Peninsula Family YMCA. One great example of the partnership is the partnership with the YMCA. We brought them here to offer swimming classes for our youth this summer, and they in turn went and secured a grant. They just emailed us about 2 weeks ago, so that no one will be turned away, and they're going to be offering swim scholarships. So that's what happened. That's one of the benefits of partnership. These things obviously cost time and money, even for us, and we are running a deficit on this particular program right now. We're projecting to break even in 3 years, and we continue to seek assistance in the form of grants and from our partners in closing that gap as well. A little glimpse about the future. We are in the process of starting renovations on the train depot so that we can offer more recreation activities and place for convenings. We have a great Zumba class that happens in there right now. That's really brings in families from all over Half Moon Bay, and unfortunately the floor isn't ideal for the Zoomer class right now, so I don't know how they're managing, but we're hoping to have new floors in there soon to make that experience better for them. We also have a new software system coming in that's going to help us with facility rentals and customer satisfaction and engagement tracking. And here are a couple of quotes in the interim. People are saying good things. People sometimes say bad things too. We listen, and we're always looking for feedback. We always want to hear from you, even if it's something that you're not particularly happy with. My staff is excellent at, responding and trying to make positive improvements, but we've had some good feedback so far. That is the end of my presentation. I think the final thing I wanted to leave you with is that, we really appreciate your support in terms of our vision of partnership, and we hope that you continue to believe in us and invest in this partnership. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I'd invite you to ask them, and the staff can help answer as well.
Oh, thank you, Georgia, for all the work, and thank you for operating our Parks and Rec. It's good to hear that there's so many more people are utilizing the classes, and you've been able to weed out the ones that weren't so popular and gain back ones that were. And this building will be open this summer for kids?
Absolutely. We have a number of summer camps happening. We're going to be hosting the YMCA as well. We have our own summer camps happening nearby, but there are a number of things that are going to be happening, as well as some great activities which you'll find in this guide. Hula, ballroom dancing, lots of fun stuff.
So not just activities for kids?
No, this is, and I hope that's something that you took away from our presentation. While our mission primarily focuses on youth, we feel that, really reaching everyone in the spectrum in the community ultimately helps the youth, and that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Councilmember Reddick.
Madam Mayor, I would love to have a copy of that presentation, if that's possible.
Yes.
Great.
Send it over to Siobhan, and she can send it to us.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, an electronic copy. Council members, any questions?
Well, I think when we make decisions, we look for results, and you've definitely showed us results. So thank you very much. And I think all the presentations this evening have been wonderful. Staff, good job so far here. But yeah, great results, guys. And I know a lot of people put not only their heart and soul in it, but they put their own resources in it too.
Yes.
And I think that's key for the rest of the community to realize that once in a while you have to make a contribution too to this group to keep moving it forward in a positive direction. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I just want to, through the mayor, just want to point out the obvious that there's so much great stuff here, but also the fact that so much of it is the result of collaboration. And on the coast side, in recent years, all the progress has been through collaborative efforts. So I'm really thrilled to see that the partnership with the YMCA and work with Rachel. I think that's great. And where else would you see the city, the YMCA, and the Boys and Girls Club working together and happily? I think that's really fantastic. So it's a testament to your flexibility. and the things you're bringing to our families are just fantastic. And I really can't thank you enough. And I can't wait to use the skate park. I'm just psyched about that.
Yeah. Thank you. Great. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, and our next presentation is from Connect the Coast, and we're happy to have our Board of Supervisor, Mr. Horsley, here this evening.
Gee, my foot went to sleep. I won't stand over there, but in any case, Mayor Fraser, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak about this. This is a little bit more of a controversial project with Connect the Coastside because it has to do with traffic, and everybody has an opinion on traffic, as we all know. I have a couple staff people here, Nicholas Calderon and James Hinchcamp, have worked on it. We've actually worked on this for about the last year, and our consultant is from DKS. He's Bill Loudon. He's actually going to give the presentation. Just to give you a little bit of background, the reason we did this in the first place is the Coastal Commission required us to do a traffic plan, Connect the Coastside, essentially a traffic plan, before we could do any kind of changes on our LCP or the local coastal plan. And as you know, we are doing a Princeton plan, and while there's not a lot of changes in Princeton, there will be some changes, but before we're able to actually go to the Coastal Commission to have some modifications to the LCP in Princeton, we really have to have this Connect the Coastside project completed. Now, it is not completed as of yet. We've had a couple of community meetings, and they have been controversial. And as I prefaced it when I met with constituents most recently last week at Cypress Meadows, I prefaced it by saying some of what you see you're going to hate, and some you may like, but nothing is finalized as of yet. But the issue is that our LCP requires that we mitigate the traffic, that we figure out things like some of our intersections are at level F, and they have to be, the Coastal Commission requires them to be at level D. To do that, there's a number of things that can be done, and some of them, after listening to the last couple of community meetings, we will be making some adjustments, and we will drop some proposals and emphasize some additional ones. So with that, I would like to have Bill Loudon actually show you the actual presentation of Connect the Coastside. Bill?
Thank you, Supervisor Horsley, and thank you, Mayor Fraser and City Council members. It's a real pleasure to be back here before you to provide a briefing on where we are in this project. I was here early in the project to tell you how we would be proceeding. Okay, I was going the wrong direction. As Supervisor Horsley said, this is a fairly unique project. It really is designed to identify a plan that will have measures to ensure that future residential and non-residential development can be supported by future transportation system and infrastructure. So we really had to look at a build-out, a maximum development level that would be permitted by zoning, and that's not usually done a full build-out. Usually you're dealing with certain projections or expectations, but we really had to look at the full build-out. And so our first task in this project was to estimate the residential, non-residential build-out, and then to look at what the impacts of that would be on level of service and also mobility and safety for all the modes. So we're not just trying to identify improvements to deal with existing issues, but for this build-out condition. We've done that. We've gone through those first two steps, and then we had a workshop after that back in October, got input on what kind of measures could be used to address those deficiencies and gaps and level of service violations. Got a lot of input. We had, I think, 111 total ideas that we put into alternatives, and we evaluated those for their effectiveness in minimizing or mitigating the impacts of the growth. And we're right in the middle of that third objective up there, and that will lead to a proposed plan that is not just transportation improvements, but some land use concepts and strategies that together will form a balance And then we will also provide a program for funding and implementing those elements. In the alternatives analysis, we took, again, a fairly unique approach. Instead of looking at very different concepts, we looked at different levels to see how far you might have to go to address the deficiencies that would come from this build-out. So we looked at a low cost, low impact, but also potentially low benefit in addressing the deficiencies. This was mostly, everything was an existing right-of-way, mostly through striping, trail improvements and connections. It was about a $10 million package. The second was a medium cost, medium impact, really looking at the problem of access from roadways that don't have signals, which is where most of the level of service violations occur. It's those people trying to get on that have the long delay. So it's looking at consolidation of driveways, signalization along the way to try to deal with that. And then the third was some major capacity improvements, bigger projects. The second was about a $50 million package, and the third about a $150 million package. Well, out of those, we picked what seemed to perform best and do best overall, and developed a hybrid alternative, which came to around $100 million for the package. In the evaluation of all of these alternatives, including the first three and the hybrid, we assessed technical feasibility, engineering feasibility, and design considerations, appropriateness for the context, the cost, the ability to address the deficiencies. The defined standards are really our only roadway level of service standards. Everything else for pedestrians, bicycle transit, we had to develop some qualitative scoring. And that included how well did it connect parts of the area of the mid-coast and connect existing pedestrian and bicycle facilities. How well did it provide access to unserved areas, improvements in safety, access to the shoreline. Was it in a previously recommended in a earlier study? Did it have a precedent? And then what were the capital costs? So those were used to evaluate the modes other than the roadway. And again, out of this, we developed a hybrid. Within the hybrid, it included a number of roadway and intersection improvements, including turn restrictions from either signing restricting left turns out of local roads or medians to block that kind of access. Left turn pockets for businesses on State Route 92. Quite a bit of signalization was examined, and I believe 4 new signals were included in the hybrid. Consideration of roundabouts, and there were roundabouts included in the hybrid. Some limited widening of Highway 1 to try to address the link or roadway deficiency, and then a passing lane on a portion of 92. Within Half Moon Bay, this included consideration of a roundabout at Kehoe with pedestrian crossing, striping, and flashers, consolidation of driveway and frontage road in the Nurseryman's Exchange area. That was part of the circulation element for Half Moon Bay. The other two were as well, Grand Boulevard and Terrace Avenue consolidation and a signal and crossing, and Highway 1 and Main Street, the south end, signalization. There were improvements for bicycle and pedestrian, including the Naomi Patridge and Coastal Trail gap closures. Sharrows, that's a bike route on a local road, a community street, with markings to indicate that it's to be shared with the bicyclist. A full bike lane on Capistrano Street in El Granada, and numerous striped crossings with beacons. I think there were 17 along the route identified to improve pedestrian safety. There were transit improvements, improved bus stops, shuttle bus service during special events, more frequent weekend Samtran service, as well as Samtran local route improvements, extension of the service and also more frequent service, park and ride shuttles at community lots during special events and on high demand weekends, and bringing back school bus service. Parking improvements included improved and expanded parking lots. There were no new parking lots proposed, just expansion and improvement of existing ones. Improved access to parking and wayfinding signage. Within Half Moon Bay, the pedestrian, bicycle, and parking improvements included, again, extension and gap closure on the Naomi Patridge and coastal trail segments, north and south ends of the city, the Sharrows on Main Street, and park and ride lots being identified to serve shuttles for special events and high demand. Well, we evaluated this hybrid alternative, and these are some of the conclusions. First, that most of the improvements considered could be cost-effective ways to improve multimodal mobility, safety, and access, well worth consideration. But even the most extreme improvements, those from the package 3, alternative 3, that included widening, wouldn't address all of the build-out deficiencies. There were still level of service standards that wouldn't be met under that. And as a result, there would need to be land use policy options considered for how to bring down that total build out, or to look at it from a reasonable projection, what's a reasonable amount of growth to expect, but also changes in the standards. Some of the standards are fairly old, and as you may know, our state is moving away from level of service standards and encouraging other multimodal standards. So those would be required or be considered as in the next step. And we are looking right now at some land use policy options, and Half Moon Bay is participating in that. All of the recommendations that come out of this will be adopted within the county and would be advisory within Half Moon Bay, and we're pleased to have the participation. We did have a workshop, as Supervisor Horsley said, last Wednesday, very spirited one. Some of the conclusions from that are that there's a desire for real context-sensitive improvements that reflect the scenic and semi-rural character of the area. There's not a desire to see standards driving roadway improvements that go against that nature or natural quality, and there's a real strong desire to see land use policy considered. There's also a desire for more opportunities for public input. We had one additional workshop planned, and now we're working with the county on possibly 2 or 3 more workshops to make sure there's adequate opportunity for public input. So we're hoping to move through the task 3, which is the evaluation of alternatives, pretty soon identifying a preferred alternative, doing environmental evaluation of that, and leading into the development of the full plan, which includes the funding and implementation, and hopefully have approval of the plan by January of 2016. So thank you for the opportunity to present, and I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you. That was quite a list of alternatives and options that you've shown. And there's going to be more community engagement. When do you see the next workshops happening? Do you have any dates coming forward?
We don't have it scheduled. We're anticipating a workshop on land use policy options. We've developed some material, an evaluation report. We're looking at some additional alternatives. As soon as that gets shaken out, we'll take it to our technical advisory committee, and then we will schedule a workshop on land use policy options. Then after that, there's likely to be another workshop on the full set of transportation and policy options that are being recommended as part of the plan, and then ultimately on the full plan.
Okay. Council members?
Thank you for the presentation. Very picky here, but I know the owner of Rocket Farms would like to have that changed from Nurseman's Exchange.
Okay.
That is no longer affiliated, and Mr. Cosmont owns Rocket
All right,
Farms.
we will make that change.
It's very minor, but they're very sensitive.
Good point.
He owns it.
Councilmember Reddick?
I have read the documents to date, have a lot of concerns and questions, but don't feel that tonight is the right time to air them. I suspect we'll be having an item in the future about our own Highway 1 projects, and at that time, perhaps we can discuss that information. But I really appreciate the presentation.
And our full report on the alternatives, transportation alternatives, is on the website, connectthecoastside.com, and welcome you all to go online and review the report.
I would just like to point out that I think it's really, really important for Half Moon Bay residents to follow this process, even though it's being managed by the county and most of the territory being covered is in the unincorporated county of San Mateo. But what is going to happen there is going to affect us here in Half Moon Bay. So I think it's advisable for everybody to follow this process as well.
Well, Councilwoman Ruddick, I have to say that at our last meeting, about half of the people there were actually constituents from the city of Half Moon Bay. And we did have to study Half Moon Bay. We were required to look at the whole corridor from Half Moon Bay all the way up to the slide. And I want to emphasize that we're not finished. I mean, one of the reasons I said that some of the ideas you may hate and some you may like is that's exactly what we're finding with our public meetings. And that's one of the reasons that we've decided to extend public input for 3 more meetings. We want to make sure we get this right. And you also heard about the cost of $100 million. We don't have $100 million. I know you don't have $100 million. So we're going to be looking at the projects that are really cost effective. So we'll do a cost benefit analysis. And we're not going to do them all. It's over a long period of time. But one of the things is that we're really trying to improve safety. Not only the mobility, but also safety at the same time. One of the intersections that we pointed out, for example, like California and Highway 1, some of the constituents there said, gee, that intersection works really well. Well, we had to point out that there were 4 broadside accidents, and those are the accidents that are most likely to cause a major bodily injury. And that's one of the reasons that we looked at that. We're studying that particular intersection. In any case, we do really appreciate the involvement of the staff from Half Moon Bay, and we'll continue with those, making sure that residents of Half Moon Bay realize that we're looking at the entire corridor from Half Moon Bay always up to Devil's Slide. And so thanks for your giving us this time for a brief presentation of the project to date.
I would just like to add, I think it's great that you mentioned context sensitive at the end of your presentation. I know that's very important to Coastside residents that, certainly we attend to safety, but people care about the scenic qualities and the open space and natural resources here. And a primary policy right now for Caltrans is this context sensitive approach. So I know I'll be paying attention to that.
I'll have to say that your constituents and my constituents made that abundantly clear.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Horsley, for coming this evening for the presentation. Great. And next, Mayor's announcements of community activities. We had a group of parents here who were waiting for the last hour to speak. They wanted to, they had to go to pick up their kids, but they wanted to make sure everyone knows that they're invited to the library tomorrow because there is an event called the WikiSeat Gallery, and that starts at 6 o'clock. And if you're interested, there are some flyers on the table for that as well. And a couple of things. On May 1st, Bay Book has an author, Greg Isles, will be there with his new book called The Bone Tree. He is a New York Times bestselling author, and his last book, Natchez, was excellent. So that's May 1st. Go out and support Bay Book, one of our great independent bookstores. And as well, Taste of the Coast is back, the Senior Coastsiders fundraiser. That's on May 3rd. It's $50 if you buy your tickets now, $60 at the door, and you can buy them, call up the Senior Coastsiders, and I believe they're out in New Leaf as well. Does council have any updates of activities for the weekend coming up? Okay.
I have a couple items to mention. So just ad hoc, a group of volunteers is getting together Saturday morning to paint the beautiful bunkers at Smithfield. And if anybody else is interested, they could see me or join me there Saturday morning. I'll give you more details. There is a concert in the park, which I'm sure Alex is going to talk about, that our fine Parks and Rec Committee is putting on. That's coming up on May 3rd at 1 o'clock. And lastly, this is over the hill, but I know a lot of people are active in the room and watching, that there's an organization that I learned about this weekend called Thrive, and they have Thrive on Board, which is really a networking and matchmaking group for nonprofits and nonprofit boards and prospective board members. I think it's important that all of us that are in public service and do a lot of volunteering, that we network with other people. We can look at our partnership with Boys and Girls Club partnership with YMCA. I actually, through some of that collaboration, I met Rachel Del Monte and helped bring her into the equation here for this collaboration. So I will attend that, but I think it's important for that networking among nonprofits or anybody interested in being on a board. They're kind of shopping for board members. So that is next Wednesday, the 29th, from 5 to 7:30 at the College of San Mateo. That's all I have.
Thank you. Of course, we have Earth Day coming up tomorrow and the Earth Day Fair, but you'll hear more about that in our city manager updates, which we're happy to have Deputy City Manager Alex Kotijian with us this evening. So we go to City Council reports. I'll start with Councilmember Reddick.
I'm going to pass tonight, seeing that we have a really heavy agenda with a lot of people who want to address issues, so.
All right. So then I'll leave it to Councilmember Penrose to tell us about the weekend that most of us spent.
It was wonderful. I had surf and turf for the very first time, and I could only eat about a third of it. We had great seminars. We had what they call breakout sessions, so that you went from one topic to another, and it wasn't the whole group. It was just a quarter or a fifth of the group that went to the seminar. So it was they were very informative, a lot of fun. We were in Monterey, delightful place to be.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor Kowalczyk.
Thank you. Just a few things. So this last weekend was the Progress Seminar, and much like the Thrive on Board collaboration networking among nonprofits, the Progress Seminar is really important because it is a opportunity for all the elected officials in San Mateo County to collaborate, have some education, some seminars together, but also network, and a lot of good things came out of that. I'm going to bring a couple of those things back to this community, including some work with Comcast and meetings with Comcast. And they have a program where they will provide some low cost or free access to internet connectivity, and if we have a need for that, we're going to assess that and bring that back, as well as some leadership opportunities for middle school girls in our community. Covered different topics, closing technology education gaps, learned all about the retail changes happening at Hillsdale, which is interesting and could be informative and instructive for our merchants, and happy to share some of those findings. It's really, all their changes are really closely tied to understanding the audience and their customers' needs and how to serve them well. And that's something, as a community that serves tourists, and our stores, our businesses that serve tourists and locals, we need to be really focused on our customers. And something about water, apparently we don't have enough, and we talked a lot about that. That's all I covered. Thank you.
Councilmember Mueller.
Yeah, thank you. Had the privilege to be invited by the search firm looking for a new Coastside Cabrillo Unified School District superintendent. So we, along with the mayor, we were able to sit in for about 40 minutes with the search team, give them our input on what we really would like to see in a new superintendent on the district here. So I think that was very worthwhile. And then attended the ribbon cutting for our Hasek Ace Hardware store in Redwood City, along with the mayor of Redwood City, because it's their 5th store. And they're just an amazing family that are doing a great job, and we all know that. So I ran over to Redwood City for that big, beautiful store in the Woodside Plaza over there. So that's all I have.
Thank you. And as was briefly mentioned, Councilmember Penrose, Reddick, myself, and Rick were at the weekend in Monterey with our colleagues, all the Board of Supervisors. Thank you for putting on this event. I thought it was outstanding with networking, and it was good conversations. And one of the things you had mentioned in your Coastside Connect is about the transportation. I know several of us had ongoing conversations about improving transportation, but particularly with Pacifica and us, we're kind of left out on a lot of things. So that the fact that you're looking at extending Samtrans coverage over here on the weekends and different alternatives, I think that's a conversation we have to keep having here, because that's we don't have the transportation opportunities that others have in that area. So I will be brief there as well. And we'll go now to Alex and share with us some exciting things coming up.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Alex Kojikin, Deputy City Manager for this great city. A couple of the updates this evening for council. One item that's not on the list right here, I'll be very quick. From time to time, we receive thank yous and good jobs from the community. We received a couple emails from residents on Ventura and Washington this past week regarding our community development department reaching out and having neighborhood meetings out there regarding street reconstruction projects that will be starting in the near future. So that was nice kudos. I wanted to share that with you all. Concert in the park. So on Sunday, May 3rd, so in less than 2 weeks, there's flyers for everyone in the audience as well, right up at the table. There is a concert being put on by the Half Moon Bay Parks and Recreation Committee, and they're working with the Latino Council, and it has a Cinco de Mayo theme. It's going to be at the Johnston House from 1 to 5 p.m. And we invite everybody in the community to come and join us out there for a great celebration. The next event that we're having is tomorrow, actually. It's the second annual Half Moon Bay Earth Day event, Earth Day and Resource Fair and Compost Giveaway for the Half Moon Bay community. This year, the event will be held on Kelly Avenue between Main Street and Johnston, and it will be from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And there'll be numerous community organizations on hand for that event. So come out and join us. And there's another flyer that I have left out on the table as well. So please get a flyer, and I'd love to see you all there tomorrow. Finally, we have Pillar Cedars Creek Bridge update. I'd like to invite our Community Development Director, Dante Hall, to go ahead and give a quick report on this.
Good evening, Council. Dante Hall, Community Development Director for this great city. A quick update on Pillar Cedars Bridge. Staff spent some time this week responding to the bidders, getting questions and asking for specific details in the bid package. Additionally, we have submitted some clarifying information to some of our permitting agencies, California Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We don't anticipate any issues. We're still within the timeline that we set aside for permitting. So at this point, there's no issue or problem there. The bids are scheduled to be due back to the city on May 1st. At that time, we'll evaluate them, and we should be coming back to the City Council shortly with the recommendation. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Great. Thanks for the update, Dante.
And that concludes reports out from the City Manager.
Thank you. Councilmember Muller?
Yeah, just on Earth Day tomorrow, I think it's very important. We're looking at the compost, and I won't give you 100%, but I spent the afternoon incorporating some compost that we purchased from Andrini family here, and for the giant pumpkin time. So if you're going to grow a giant pumpkin, you better get some compost tomorrow. But I won't tell you the rest of the story.
And for your compost, bring your bucket, bring a 5-gallon bucket. There will be some students from the high school that will be helping put that into the bucket for you, so you won't have to do the shoveling, but bring a bucket as well. And you have to be a Half Moon Bay resident, so show your proof of residency. And you will also get a succulent plant as well. All right, we will go now to public forum. And first up, we have Mr. Ben Halstead, followed by Jules Sofer.
Good evening, Council. Ben Halstead, Wavecrest lot owner. As you know, I've been, trying to organize my, Wavecrest lot owner neighbors into an entity that, possibly the city can communicate with and, maybe negotiate with if it ever comes down to that. In starting that process, I have to do all this by mail. And my first mailer went out. I admit it was dramatic. But in my defense, I was trying to, instill a response, get everybody, to respond to it. It put a little bit of fear and hope at the same time into them. I don't know if, anybody of you saw it. Joe Chamberlain definitely got a copy and emailed me and, pointed out that in there I was going on some assumptions that, turned out to be later not correct. So I promised her that, I'm be sending out another mailer that I would, try to get clarification. So my assumption was in my first mailing that, right now, my little handouts here, we have a PUD for North Wavecrest. It's got, like most PUDs do, it's got development in it. It's got housing, it's got visitor serving, recreational. And then we have the compact core over here, January 2015, that shows this PUD area now conservation open space. So my assumption was that the zoning was going to change from PUD to open space. And I guess after I spoke at the GPAC last meeting, Mr. Hall, after I spoke, he kind of rebutted what I said and said that the city does not plan to change the PUD designations. So a question mark went off in my head. None of the GPAC people raised their hand, but if it's going to stay PUD, but also be open space, how is that going to happen? And, I am going to throw out another assumption out there that the only way that can happen is you go into the PUD and take out all the development. And you have, a planned unit development with no development, a planned unit undevelopment, a PUU. Now, if that's not correct, then, maybe you can have city staff, you have my contact information there. I think these people, they have the right to know, what's on the agenda, even if the agenda is hidden. So I welcome staff comments later on this week, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halstead. Jules Sofer, followed by Jerry Steinberg.
Jules Sofer, 536 Poplar Street. Well, the previous speaker illustrates what I want to talk to you about. And that is freedom of speech and freedom to be heard, the right to get some kind of a reaction for what you want to know. I mean, we all pledge allegiance to the flag when we start this meeting, and I assume we mean it. And the Constitution of the United States has what's called amendments. The First Amendment, the most important, freedom of speech. And freedom of speech means that people should be able to say, and we should be listening to and responding to what they have to say, whether we agree with them or not. And it doesn't mean that 3 council members should be able to lock out all other speech, all other opinions, all other agenda, all other things that they don't want to hear and don't want to be bothered with. Freedom of speech was something that this country was founded on. It comes from the English common law. And it's a very cherished item that we've all inherited. And we wear the American flag proudly on our lapels, and we look at the American flag and we say that we are Americans, and we believe in the American democratic ideals. And even a Frenchman like Voltaire was kind enough to say to someone who he did not think was right, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. And I think that this city council has wandered very, very far from what I'm talking about right now. And I think that they ought to get back on track with freedom of speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sofer. Jerry Steinberg, followed by George Mudiff.
Jerry Steinberg, 591 Terrace Avenue. Thanks for letting me make any kind of presentation today. One of the things is that at the last council meeting, there was supposed to be a discussion on Highway 1 safety and congestion relief, and then it was being moved to this meeting, but it never appeared on the agenda. And I'm assuming that the minutes will show that it was never discussed, and I'm assuming that the Connect the Coastside presentation was the substitute for that. I'm not going to get an answer, but I think that that's what the concept was. I did attend the meeting last week of Connect the Coastside, and the supervisor's comment about it being lively was good. It was pretty lively. But I think what it really showed was when you get up to talk to the council, you have 3 minutes. This was an open meeting where people talked for 2 hours, 3 hours. And I think that in this brochure, you mentioned about having more meetings, outreach meetings. And I think those outreach meetings should be just like the one that was held for Connect the Coastside, where you're not limited to 3 minutes. I mean, it was pretty lively. There was a lot of opinions. It was good. I mean, because a lot of people, I mean, some of it is not just getting information out, some of it is just venting. And I think that's needed. I think the speaker before me, I think that's one of the issues, is that there isn't an opportunity to really get any information out. Also, on the city website, there isn't any information. It disappears after a day or two. You need to keep it there, whether you like the Coastal Commission or not. You can find their information on the web 10 years later. It's there, and that's what you need. That's what would be very helpful. In regards to this presentation, there was a lot of information that was missing. The main part was that there was a CDP, there was a submission on the famous lighted terrace, and it was, you folks pulled it back because the Highway Department and the Coastal Commission had just numerous questions on it. And I think that part of the issue here also is that when you start to decide on these things, you have to look at the build out. And I mentioned something after the meeting last time to Farmer John, that you have to look at right now what's happening is there's other development that's going to go on, like this Podesta property, that's going to affect this. And I think all that has to be considered, and a lot of work has to be done on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. George Mudiff, followed by Frank Garrity, followed by Doreen Garrity.
Good evening, George Mudiff. Jerry just beat me to the punch again. That's what I wanted to find out, and I'm not going to make any assumptions. One of the reasons I came this evening was to follow up on the Highway 1 traffic study and congestion relief item, which was item number 9 from the last agenda that I thought was going to be carried forward here along with the sidewalk matter. and I didn't see it on the agenda, so it's not there. And without making any assumptions, I guess I have a question. Is there some reason that we probably would want to know about why it's not on the agenda, or are you planning on putting it on the agenda? If so, when? Can I get some idea of what to expect regarding that particular item? Because that's a very interesting item, and I think an important item for the city and the coast side. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank and Doreen Garrity.
Hi, Frank Garrity, Silver Avenue in Half Moon Bay, and tonight I'm representing AFOG, or Advocates for Open Government, and as the name says, we're here to advocate for open government from our staff and council. And at the last meeting, I kind of focused on the general plan. I stressed the need for two-way conversations in the form of neighborhood meetings. Now, I hear that those are in the works, so thank you very much to Dante and staff for getting those at least in the plans and headed that way. So anyway, last time I said that these public council meetings are great, and that we're here allowed to listen to you do business, the public's business, and you hear from us. But what happens is the public talks, and the staff and council listen, but you do not respond. And then the staff and council talks, and the public listens, but we are not allowed to respond or ask questions. So that ends up being two one-way conversations where things get missed and things don't get explained fully. So I have the same message tonight. On this time, I'm going to use the Connect the Coast site as an example. And I appreciate the presentation that was just made. I also attended the Connect the Coast site presentation in Moss Beach last week. Now, the difference between the two presentations is that tonight's was a one-way conversation. And I realize it was the first time presented, so I'm hoping there'll be more. But it's a one-way, whereas the one in Moss Beach was a true two-way conversation. The county people on the mid-coast were allowed to ask questions, and the consultants and county planners answered those questions to clarify our understanding of the project. The county people on the mid-coast were also allowed to give input so that the consultants and county planners could learn what the public wants and does not want in the project. So our request tonight is that the city of Half Moon Bay do more of the same thing that the county did in Moss Beach. That is to have more two-way conversations so that we can learn from each other. Thanks.
Thank you. Doreen, followed by Pam Fisher.
Good evening. My name is Doreen Garrity, and I'm also a member of AFOG, or Advocates for Open Government. I'm basically going to be echoing the same things that other speakers have spoken about. But the first thing was, last week I did speak during open comments with the City Council meeting and asked about our new City Council members and being able to assign GPAC members. It seemed like it was no big deal and would be fairly easy to take care of, so I'm just wondering where we are in that progress. Second is, I am concerned as to why there was a Connect the Coast Side presentation on the agenda which does not allow open comments or any discussions. It seems like we're only having a one-way conversation. Citizens in Half Moon Bay are not being allowed to have an engaging discussion with our City Council members. As Frank and other speakers have said, we're given 3 minutes to say what we want, and you listen. Whereas last week, I too went to the Connect the Coast Side meeting in Moss Beach, and yes, it was extremely lively, and it was extremely spirited. But that's how our meetings need to be. We need to have open workshop meetings where the community can have an open conversation with their council members and with the consultants. I think that's really going to help a lot. I do appreciate that we're going to be having neighborhood meetings. I think that's going to also help, but to really move things along, we need to have meetings here in Half Moon Bay to get more citizens engaged. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Pam Fisher, followed by Mike Ferrara.
Pam Fisher, Highland Avenue, Half Moon Bay. I have to sadly admit that when Councilmember Ruddick described the behavior of the 3 seasoned council members at the last meeting in terms of their refusal to postpone their decision to award a contract to the testing company that the staff recommended as tone deaf, she hit the nail on the head. And when Vice Chair Kowalczyk actually asked why, it was extremely disturbing from a man who makes whose occupation is in marketing, and her response was PR. at least the public needs to feel as if it's being listened to. When Mayor Fraser responded with her recollection concerning the scope of the Promise Committee, stating it was never her intent to have this proposed committee weigh in on the choice of a company to do the testing on the Main Street Bridge, honestly, I was flabbergasted. The entire issue which arose and became Measure F was a lack of confidence in the decision made by the former city council to demolish the Main Street Bridge because the staff had determined it was in imminent danger of collapse. Although no testing of the bridge's structural integrity had occurred and still hasn't. The staff's decision was not trusted. The council's decision was not trusted, and thus was born the Main Street Bridge's designation as an historical structure and the overwhelming success of Measure F. It was all about the testing of the Main Street Bridge. So how would anyone imagine, of the 13 applicants, including at least one engineer and one PhD in physics, that they would not presume they would be involved in the decision to hire the best company to do the best, most thorough job possible to determine if indeed the bridge could be restored? Well, that was not the opinion of Mayor Fraser, Vice Mayor Kowalczyk, and Councilmember Muller. Mayor Fraser actually stated that she envisioned this committee to be involved in the design process, helping with merchant issues, and I glazed over about then. I don't know how to explain this obvious disconnect with what the main idea was that gave birth to Measure F. The City Council has been sitting on 13 applicants for the Main Street Bridge Citizens Oversight or Advisory Committee since sometime after the June 2014 election. So now we'll see if the City Council appoints this promised committee and even allows its members to offer their insight as to the quality and quantity of testing. The testing will take place by the company awarded a contract 2 weeks ago, Tuesday evening. This is the company, the staff who recommended the destruction of the bridge, and the council who agreed with that decision hired. The Main Street Bridge Citizens Oversight Committee should have been appointed before the November 2014 election. This is not the best example of open government as regards transparency and accountability. We deserve better, and as an AFOG member, we will continue to speak to this issue.
Thank you. Mike Farrar, followed by Hope Atmore.
Good evening, Mayor Fraser, council members, Mike Ferreira, Post Office Box 811, Moss Beach. I attended last week's meeting of Connect the Coastside in Moss Beach, and my purpose in coming here tonight is to commend Supervisor Horsley. The meeting was initially set up as a standard PowerPoint and then go put dots on pasteboard with not much interaction. Lenny Roberts and 2 MCC members spoke to the supervisor before and asked for permission to address the meeting with some contrary ideas for how to conduct the meeting, and the supervisor allowed that to happen and for the meeting to be opened up. And I'm sure the supervisor knew full well that that meant a long evening. And I have to say, he took it with a great deal of grace. I heard, we hear you," coming from the supervisor several times during the meeting. And tonight, he has shown that he heard the people up there in his remarks tonight. And it was a unique exercise. It's one that I think we could all look on. Our transportation network is very important to us out here. It just happened to have been the 30th anniversary of my moving to the coastside, and so caused me to remember that the very day I decided to move to the coastside, driving over here from Palo Alto, we got stopped at the top of the hill and went, bumper to bumper all the way into town. I knew what I was moving into relative to highways 30 years ago. We can't really completely fix that. We can ameliorate it, we can mitigate it a little bit. Can't fix that. You can't build highways out here that can satisfy all the demands from over the hill to visit the coastside on weekends. Not too many weekends ago, it took me an hour and a half to get from Lobitos Road to the city limits of Half Moon Bay. I mean, when the people really decide to come out here, the system just can't handle it. So I do think that the future meetings that the supervisor has also graciously added to the process are going to help us get a much better product, and I can't really commend him enough. Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you. Hope Atmore, that is our last public forum card. We public forum, Harvey, or for a specific item? It might be buried in the other one, so thank you for saying something. We'll let you say something after.
Thank you. I'm Hope Atmore. I am the co-president of the Friends of the Half Moon Bay Library and also the chair of the 2016 Capital Campaign Fundraising Committee for the library. I just wanted to thank you, council members, again for your 4-to-1 vote on February 3rd to approve moving forward with lease revenue bonds. I want to make it very clear what that vote meant for us as a fundraising body. We are now able to go out and ask people to donate to this great cause of a library for the coast with the confidence that we have the backing of the majority of our council. And that is a really important part for us. I have been approached by many, many people now and have received a lot of emails. People are really excited that this is finally going to happen. We've been waiting for, some of us, 14 years where we've been working on this library project. And to know that it's actually moving forward and progress is being made and we have hopefully a set date for groundbreaking is a really, really positive step, and we are very excited and we thank you for that. So with our vote, we can now start really raising that money. But I want to kind of point out just how much money we need to raise, because I think some of the numbers that are being thrown around by people sort of projecting based on some high sum that's not actually the real number, it's being lost. What we actually need to raise at this point is not that much. With the funding that is already secured, we are at 75% of funding our new library. 75%. So that leaves 25% without any lease revenue bond or anything else. The Friends of the Library and the Capital Campaign are pledging to raise another $2 million. And so I think that with all of the, well, not all of the griping, there are some people who are complaining about the amount of money that needs to be put forward through a bond, and I think it's really important to focus on the fact that that amount is actually very small. I would invite the council and the community to start sharing the real numbers that are out there, start sharing the fact that we are 75% of the way there right now. I think that's very important. And to those people who don't want to see the city take out a loan for any amount, I invite you to pull out your checkbook and donate to the building fund, because every dollar we raise is a dollar that the city will not have to take out in a bond. So if that is truly your concern and you truly want to see a new library on the coast, I invite you to contact us, go to hmblibraryfriends.org, make a donation online, or contact me directly, and I will be happy to set you up and let you know how you can make that donation. So again, I want to thank you for your vote of confidence that we're finally going to get the library that the Coast Side deserves and needs, and that we are so close to getting there. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rohrbach, found your card. It was stuck with the others.
Okay. Good evening, Council. Harvey Rohrbach, another proud member of Advocates for Open Government. The last time I addressed the Council, I said that there were some items that were not on the agenda. I was hoping to see them on this agenda, and they're still not there. On September 16th, 2014, that's over 7 months ago, the Council passed the following motion. Motion by Kowalczyk and Alfano to establish a Main Street Bridge Advisory Committee to assist during the pre-development and construction phase. That's what the motion was. That was 7 months ago. We still don't have a Main Street Bridge Advisory Committee. That's number one. Number two, as Mike Ferreira pointed out, the lively Connect the Coast Side presentation in Moss Beach last week was facilitated by the fact that the citizens said it's time that we really have a dialogue. The presentation today was not a dialogue. I don't think it's right that substantive issues like the circulation element or the whatever you want to call the traffic study was presented as a presentation, a PowerPoint demo, take it, this is the way we're going to do it. If this is what the City Council wants to hear, it should be agendized. It should allow for City Council members to interact with the presentation. And 3 minutes isn't very much, but it's better than nothing. And we had nothing today in terms of having the citizens react to the Connect the Coast-Side presentation. I don't want to go into the substance of the presentation. I could do that for an hour. Much more needs to be done. But at the very minimum, we should not have presentations of substantive issues. They should be agendized as regular council business. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a quick few items I'll ask the Deputy City Manager just to update. But just to let everyone know, the presentations that all were on tonight was just some brief information to council on what is going on. They are not meant to replace any workshops that are planned in the future. They were merely just some quick updates for us. And Alex, could you, there was a couple of items that were mentioned going to be on the agenda that were from last week and this week. Could you share?
So a couple of the items on the Main Street Bridge Committee that will be brought back to the council as promised at the last council meeting on May 5th. So we invite you all to be there for that. And then also due to just trying to schedule and the allotment of time and the issues that we're dealing with, we're looking at bringing Highway 1 safety improvements back, I believe, on May 19th. So if people want to put that on their calendar as well. I hope that answers the questions.
And you want to talk about our budget workshop that's coming up?
Yeah, I'd be happy to put a plug in. At 5 p.m. on May 5th, we'll be having a budget study session. We ask everyone in the community to come out and participate in the process.
Thank you. We go now to the consent calendar. Any items to be pulled? Actually, I did have one from a member of the public, if he is still here. It was item number 6. Mr. Sofer, are you still here? He is? Okay. So item number 6 is being pulled. Are there any other items? If not, may I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve consent calendar items 3, 4, 5, and 7. Oh, yes, sorry. Items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Aye.
Councilmember Ruddick?
Aye.
Councilmember Penrose?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Kowalczyk?
Yes.
Mayor Fraser?
Yes. Thank you. And to save Mr. Sofer from staying late tonight, do you want to address item number 6 now? You've got... And Mr. Sofer, did you have a question on this in particular? Yes.
Good evening, council members. Jules Sofer. I don't know what 6 is about exactly, but I suspect, and I hope I'm wrong, that there may be the thought that riprap would be put over the side at Surfers Beach to protect Highway 1. I just want to point out, if that is the thinking, that riprap is a taking, because it takes from the public beach. The public has the beach to high water, and if you put riprap over the side, then you're taking from the public. I think a much better way of handling the situation is to move Highway 1 to the east, where there is land available. And I think that at this point, I'll stop my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Supervisor Horsley, do you want to give us an update on the partnerships and progress that you're making?
Well, the purpose of this is really protecting Highway 1. As you know, at Surfers Beach, the erosion problem is significant and it's growing. And our concern is that the Highway 1 could eventually become undermined and you could end up cutting the coastside in half, essentially. The interesting thing, even with sea level rise, Highway 1 actually is a berm that actually protects that whole Burnham Strip. So we want to make sure that that Highway 1 stays intact. Now, we did look at different options rather than RSP, or in other words, riprap. We looked at a revetment, essentially, which is a sheet piling. But when we talked to surf riders, we found that sheet piling, which in fact would take less of the beach. The problem with it is that when waves hit it, the energy from the waves is not dissipated, and it simply causes more erosion down the way. So we decided, we've really pretty much focused on RSP, or again, riprap for the fix. That'll protect the highway. We believe it'll protect it for a significant amount of time. Moving it eastward is a major project. There's on the other side, there are willows. There's lots of environmental issues on the other side. There isn't any indication that Caltrans is willing to make that determination. So this is actually a pretty good fix, we think. We're working collaboratively with both the City of Half Moon Bay, the county, as well as State of California. So we're really right in the middle of this project. We're spending between you and the county about $450,000 for the design, the permitting, the mitigation of the willows, and eventually the State of California has agreed that they're actually going to fix this, the project. It's unfortunate if we could actually, I can give you more information about dredging, sand out of the harbor and all that stuff. You can actually increase the beach if you could do beach replenishment, and that's something we would probably be working on in the future. But for now, this really is the best fix to make sure that Highway 1 is safe and secure. And as you know, when we were talking about Connect the Coastside, and we've all gone through it when the Devil's Slide went down, if that highway is undermined, you're going to have, if you think you have problems now, the traffic is going to be horrendous. So it's an important project. We really want to get it done within the next year, and make sure that the highway is safe and secure, and that we don't end up with a major link that's cut.
Thank you.
Yeah, just briefly remind everyone this agenda item is strictly about an easement. It's not about design. And I think the partnership with Caltrans and the county and us, well, we're just looking at planning and permitting. So I think the agenda item strictly, the city attorney can support me or interest that it's about easement that the city will be giving the county and Caltrans.
No.
Councilmember Reddick?
I would just like to ask one question of Supervisor Horsley. I'm interested as to whether the supervisors and their staff have spoken to the Coastal Commission about the
Yes, we have.
riprap?
We have had extensive meetings with the Coastal Commission, as well as with Caltrans. So it's a project that we actually had the Coastal Commission, as you know, we hosted them, had them come out, took a look at the site. We've actually also met with their staff. This is something we vetted with the Coastal Commission very extensively. One of the other benefits of the project, by the way, is the coastal trail that currently is so badly eroded that people actually end up having to walk on the highway, especially if you have like a stroller or something. We'll actually, with a grant from the Coastal Commission, actually restore the trail so that people will be able to once again use the trail. So it'll connect that portion of the coastal trail. I think it's an excellent project.
Thank you.
there's no further discussion, I would move to adopt this resolution approving and authorizing the city manager to execute a grant deed to the state of California for city-owned slope easement for the purpose of constructing and maintaining the Surfers Beach Trail Erosion Protection Project. And I guess I can include item 2 in there, approve a waiver of any compensation for its easement grant for the good of the city and its residents.
Motion has been made. May I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Horsley.
Well, thank you, council members.
Thank you. Thanks for coming this evening. We'll move now to item number 8, resolution supporting the California Coastal Trail as a priority conservation area.
We'll have the city's Community Development Director, Dante Hall, present this item before you.
Good evening again, council and members of the City Council. Dante Hall, Community Development Director for this great city. This item was pulled from the consent calendar last time. Just briefly, it is a resolution in support of the California Coastal Trail, designating the California Coastal Trail as a priority conservation area to the ABAG upon their recommendation. And in the report, we provided you a little bit of information about what a priority conservation area is. ABAG has established PCAs, priority conservation areas, in regionally significant areas that have a broad spectrum of support as areas that are in danger and need protection. This essentially opens up an additional revenue source potentially to provide some protection and to provide improvements in areas that are actually nominated for priority conservation areas. And I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions because this was a pulled item. We also have, I think we have Amy Hutzel, is she here? Okay, who is actually program manager for the Coastal Conservancy, and it was upon her recommendation, and she'll be happy to answer any questions also.
Well, welcome, Amy, if you'd like to come to the podium. Amy is with the Coastal Conservancy.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm with the California State Coastal Conservancy. It's great to be here this evening. Thank you. And thanks for considering this resolution. The Coastal Conservancy is nominating the Coastal Trail as a priority conservation area to ABAG in the 4 Bay Area counties that the Coastal Trail passes through: San Mateo, San Francisco, Marin, and Sonoma. And we are seeking resolutions from those 4 counties, as well as the 3 cities that are on the coast side of the Bay Area: Half Moon Bay, Pacifica, and Daly City. And we've gotten a number of resolutions so far, and I believe out of the 7 counties and cities all have at least scheduled resolutions. These are due by May 30th to ABAG. The Priority Conservation Area program at ABAG, you may be familiar with. It started in 2007. They did their first call for nominations of PCAs in the Bay Area, and a number of places and kind of more programs are nominated. For example, most of Napa County is a PCA. Most of West Marin, the agricultural lands of West Marin, are a PCA. The Bay Trail and the Ridge Trail are both PCAs. This 2015 update is an opportunity for cities and counties and open space districts to add additional PCAs or submit resolutions about previous PCAs that you'd like to pull off. It's really, the PCA program is really incentive-based. It's not a regulatory program in any way. It is a way for ABAG and MTC, it's really MTC funding, federal transportation funding, to go towards the support of priority conservation areas in the Bay Area as a complement to the support of priority development areas, the PDAs in the Bay Area. And MTC and ABAG put $10 million into a grant program a couple years ago that went towards the PCAs, and the Conservancy helped to administer that program. And just as an example, the City of Pacifica was one of the successful applicants for the Milagro Battery Ridge Trail, because the Ridge Trail is a nominated PCA. So this go around, we'd like to get the Coastal Trail added to the PCA program. The designation would be of existing sections of the Coastal Trail, as well as future sections, but we don't know what those future alignments will be. They will have to be determined, of course, through public planning processes and environmental review. So, yeah, if you have any questions, I'd welcome them. Thank you, and thanks for considering this.
Thank you, Amy, for being here, and thank you for your organization's support on our coastal trail to continue this and the nomination. Councilmember Ruddick.
Good evening. I actually have a couple of questions for Amy. I'd like to first point out that I also work for the State Coastal Conservancy, and Amy works across the hall, but I was working from home today and couldn't ask my questions. So I was looking at the map that's called California Coastal Trail near Half Moon Bay. And I noticed that the red line that illustrates the course of the trail does not include the most recent segment of the trail constructed from the Seymour Bridge south to, well, it's actually, I think, just to the first big row of trees. Okay. But in any case, it's not indicated on the map. I don't know if that's necessary to add that to be covered by the PCA designation, or?
I don't think it has to be added. It's, we should add it within our office and make sure that the maps we have of the coastal trail are up to date. But the designation is of the coastal trail, both, you know, the existing segments and new segments as they come online.
One more question. So would this designation include, for instance, a more easterly route for the trail if, you know, in the future erosion, you know, eats away at the supports for the trail and it has to be moved, or the purchase of a rolling easement or something like that? Would it?
Definitely. It could, the designation it would be of the coastal trail in whatever form it would take in the future. So if through public planning processes and environmental review, the coastal trail alignment shifts, the designation would be of the coastal trail. The same is true of the San Francisco Bay Trail. It's not a static trail.
Thank you.
Sure.
Vice Mayor Qualcheck.
Thank you for your questions and for addressing this tonight. So my question is just pretty general, but trying to understand, and reading the staff report, it wasn't abundantly clear, but I'm trying to understand the ramifications of the designation. What does it mean? What does it allow for? What does it inhibit? I want to understand both sides of that coin.
Right. Well, it doesn't inhibit anything. There's no regulatory power attached to designation. It is a way for ABAG and MTC to invest in conservation areas around the San Francisco Bay Area. So the Priority Development Area program at ABAG, so maybe I should back up. Plan Bay Area is the region's sustainable community strategy, and it's MTC and ABAG's 30-year plan for transportation and land use, and it's a way of directing federal transportation dollars in the region to, what regionally is determined to be the highest priority for those federal transportation dollars. So the PDAs have been designated, the priority development areas around the Bay Area, and they are focused in our high-density, transit-oriented urban centers. So, much of our federal transportation dollars are going to these areas. The priority conservation areas were established as a way of supporting our more rural and natural areas and funneling some of the transportation dollars to support the non-urban areas. I would say the PCA program was $10 million last go around. That is out of a total of approximately $380 million over a 3-year period. So it's a small fraction, but it's I think nationally it's pretty groundbreaking, the use of federal transportation dollars to support conservation work. And when I say conservation work, the PCAs this round are in 3 categories: natural landscapes, agricultural preservation, urban greening, and regional recreation. So it's conservation in the broadest scheme.
And when you say recreation, is it consistent with maintaining and keeping and encouraging the trails, or is it counter to that and more? I guess I'm trying to understand if adopting this would in any way inhibit access to our trails, use of our trails, and extension of our trails, or if it encourages that. And that's what I was confused about.
I think it's definitely the latter. It's a way of encouraging, really funding through MTC and ABAG to go towards the coastal trail. And the federal transportation dollars have a lot of strings attached and a lot of, well, I shouldn't say strings attached. The federal transportation dollars, it's a fairly narrow set of things that they can fund. And trails are actually, a pretty straightforward fit with the federal transportation dollars. So in the last PCA grant round, a lot of Bay Trail and Ridge Trail projects were funded. So adding the coastal trail is a way of being able to apply for these MTC dollars in the next grant round.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Councilmember Muller.
Yes, I understand that this would also provide, and I support this resolution at this point, funding for purchasing private property owners' land too, if it passes through. Is that correct, that this funding could be used for that?
I believe the funding could go towards acquisition. In the last round, there were no land acquisitions funded with the federal transportation dollars, but it is possible. There would have to be a willing seller and an appraisal and all the normal things.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, I entertain a motion on this.
I'd first like to ask a few questions of staff, if I might. I'd like to point out, I think this is a really good idea. We want to be on any list of priorities. It's going to position us for funding for the trail. And it's important to point out to ourselves and citizens that that would include the bridges that connect the portions of the coast side trail. And as we all know, those are expensive items, and we're struggling right now to cover expenses for 3 of them. So I think it's a good idea, and I'm going to support the resolution. I would also like to discuss the possibility of bringing back, though, at the next meeting, a separate resolution that would allow us to position our key agricultural lands as priorities for future acquisition. And that would be likely areas that have prime soils. We do have several of those areas in our community. And by having them on the list, it doesn't mean that we will buy the land or try to take anybody's land, but at least it's on the list as an important resource that could qualify for funding, if we're ready and have a willing seller. So I noticed that the county in their own resolution is including significant agricultural lands in the unincorporated coast-side. And I think we might want to consider that ourselves. Because you can only, I think these nomination periods only come up about every 5 years. So, and I know that some residents have had discussions with the city manager, and I think perhaps Dante, about including other properties like the PUDs. My understanding, though, is that it's tough to include properties under, multiple ownerships, which the PUDs have. So that might not, be the best selection. But I think certainly some of our prime ag lands might be, and I'd like us to look at that before the deadline.
So, the intention for including ag land as a priority area, what's the upside for that? Maybe I'm missing your point. Why would we do that?
Well, I'm not saying that we would buy it to convert it to development, but we would be, seeking funds to protect agricultural land either by acquisition and fee title or to purchase an easement over it to protect it from future development. The whole strategy of having the whole business of having a sustainable community strategy is required under state law. And you have to identify areas where you're going to concentrate development and areas that you're going to protect. And those areas that you want to protect could be agricultural properties, recreation areas, and open space. So, you're dealing with it on both ends. You're developing here, and you're protecting on the fringe to prevent sprawl. So the conservation piece and the development piece go hand in hand. So if you're going to develop over here, then you want to protect these areas over here. And there are many areas on the coast side that a lot of folks would love to see protected in perpetuity. And there are not enough park bonds or water bond funds to cover all that. So the goal of having a resolution nominating our prime agricultural lands would be to protect those lands in perpetuity should there be, funding available and that we have a willing seller.
Okay, yeah, so I would support having a discussion on that at a future meeting.
Deadline for nominations, I believe, is May 30th. So we want to discuss that at a,
If Farm Bureau is supportive of that and the people who own this land, now maybe it's some of the land that Post already owns, I'm not sure. I would like to see what we're talking about and that the people who own that land are aware and want this to happen. I mean, I wouldn't want to just throw a designation on there without them having any input in that.
We might consult with the county to see how they handled that. I think maybe Sam Hertzberg or somebody at the county planning department might be able to answer those questions. But, and I think they may have already, passed their resolution and sent that out. I'm not quite sure, but we could find out how they did that. But I think that would be a lost opportunity if we didn't, put something out there. So I just want to, so I don't want that to interfere with our vote on the coastal trail, but I want to, I wanted to have the discussion about potentially including, our prime ag lands, the ones that are not slated for near-term development.
And I'm sorry, Mayor, just as a point of information, we actually did have a conversation with some of our open space partners about the program and potentially designating other areas. Our concern was that we're going through a general plan update process, and the prior speaker kind of quoted something I said. I don't think he got it exactly correct. The direction from council, as we understood it, was we would talk about the other elements of the general plan and then talk about land use, but that we're not looking at changing land use designations. But the concern that we had was putting this ahead of any discussion about what we want to preserve, what we want to put into this designation. We understand and we verified with the city attorney that this has no effect on land use designations, any deals to purchase land or what have you would have to go through our normal process. So we understand that this is strictly a policy issue for the city council. And if you direct us to do that, we'll be happily do that. But we did not push a recommendation to you about this because we were concerned about making the designation without the property owners knowing that the city is making that designation.
All right, council, so did you make an option on that, or you were just throwing out some other things as well? City clerk, did we have? We did not, so
there's no
will
motion.
someone make one?
There's no motion, but there's a suggestion for an agenda item for a future meeting.
I move that we adopt the resolution next in order of the City Council of the City of Half Moon Bay supporting the California Coastal Trail as a priority conservation area.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? It passes. Thank you. And we are going to have a 5-minute break.
It's nice to meet you.
Good to meet you too. So we just send you the signed resolution.
Yeah, that would be great. And I'll get the agenda off your website. They need the agenda as well as the signed resolution.
What do you think about other
I mean,
And please be seated because we are starting. Item number 9, it is discussion of potential council policy for adding items to future agendas.
Thank you, Mayor Fraser, members of the City Council. This item and the next are both items that were requested to be added to the agenda by Councilmember Penrose, I believe. I'll just give you a little bit of background. Currently, the city doesn't have a formally adopted policy on the manner in which items are placed on a city council agenda. We have done some legal research on that issue just in light of the question being raised. And in our view, from a legal perspective, while the law doesn't specifically speak to the question, at a minimum, we believe that the authority to add items to the city council agenda resides with the mayor and a quorum of city council members. Arguably, if direction to add an item to the agenda is given by a quorum of council members, that should be done at a noticed meeting to comply with the requirements of the Brown Act. However, the Brown Act, and specifically Government Code Section 54956, allows a special meeting to be called on 24 hours notice by a quorum of the council members or by the mayor. And since it can be called on 24 hours notice, that presupposes that the direction wouldn't be given at a noticed city council meeting, because if that were the case, then you would never need to call a special meeting. Since the council sitting at a regular city council meeting can always continue an item or add an item to the agenda at the meeting. So by analogy, we think that the same logic applies to placing items on the agenda. Beyond that, whether or not items can be placed on the agenda by an individual council member, in our view, is really a policy decision for the city council to make. And we've looked at a few other cities, and some require that the direction be given by a quorum or by the mayor. Others require or allow items to be added by individual council members. And just, for example, the two other cities that I represent, in Santa Cruz, items can only be added to the agenda by the mayor with the concurrence of the city manager or by a quorum of city council members. And Santa Cruz requires that the action to, or the direction to place an item on the agenda by a quorum of council members be given at a noticed meeting, again, with the exception of a special meeting. Capitola, on the other hand, by ordinance, allows items to be placed on the agenda by the mayor, council members, city manager, chair of the planning commission or any other appointed boards or commissions with the concurrence of the city manager, and by individual department heads with the concurrence of the city manager. So two other cities, two other examples of how it's done. And the question for this council is, would you like to consider a formal policy that would specify the manner in which items are placed on the agenda? So it's a policy discussion for the council. I don't know if Councilmember Penrose would like to, having asked for this to be placed on the agenda, would like to offer any comments, but that concludes my report, except I'm happy to respond to questions or comments.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes, I have prepared some remarks, and I'm going to read them because it's easier for me to read them than to try to remember what I was going to say. I'm here tonight to propose that a single council member be allowed to place a new item of interest on our regular agenda under the heading of new business. This is a matter of policy. The job of council is to set policy, and the job of staff is to take direction from council to assist in its implementation. I would like to say that we have a very hardworking staff, and I appreciate everything they do for us. However, I am quite surprised at the overreaching attitude of the staff report on council policy. According to the staff report, department heads are allowed to ask for items to be placed on the agenda. Department heads, allowing city staff to present pressing issues that might not otherwise have visibility, but are still vital to the continued or successful provision of necessary city services. These same rules should certainly apply to our elected officials. It is amazing to me that staff would suggest that staff can place a matter on the agenda at the same time that they recommend that a single council member should not, while also stating that it is not really illegal, implying that it is a widely accepted method for managing city business is misleading. There is a section called New Business on the agenda of 10 cities in our county. This is a clear example of staff attempting to control council policy decisions. Staff serves at the request of council and not vice versa. In addition, staff alludes to having a member of the public place a matter on the agenda. This is not, nor was it my intention. The majority of public comment at our last meeting asked that a council member be able to place a matter on the agenda. I was elected by a large majority of voters last fall to represent them as a member of council, and what the public has asked for, and what I am asking for, is that a single council member be allowed to place an item on the agenda. I'm not asking that a single council member set policy, simply place an item for council discussion on the agenda so that the entire council can discuss and vote on the item. I take my role as a representative of all of our citizens very seriously. This has never meant having the public make decisions or set policy. That is my job and the job of our council in entirety. When I was elected, it was on a platform promising to bring a more open attitude towards our governing process. I intend to work for that. At all of the conferences, workshops, and seminars that I have attended over these last 5 months, one idea was repeated over and over and over again. We need open, transparent government. There is nothing to fear with transparent government if it is responding to the wishes of the majority of the citizens. Denying any council member the ability to bring a matter up for discussion is saying to the public that we are handicapped in our ability to serve. I believe in the good intention of each of our council members. They work much harder and with much more thoughtful diligence than any member of the public can possibly imagine. Ours is a town of volunteers. Our council members are volunteers. We work hard at our job because we want to serve our town. There is no hidden agenda here, just hard work and careful, thoughtful decision-making. It is not the job of council to please everyone. That is clearly impossible. It is to govern through the decision-making process that results in directing policy. That is why we were elected. Please allow me to do the job that I was elected to do. Allow any council member to bring an item to the future agenda under a new business category. Another option would be to include a section called council requests in the section already on the agenda called council reports. If this item is voted on and the motion is not carried by a simple majority, that is council's prerogative, but the very least we can do is be open and transparent and hear from every council member when he or she brings something they deign to be in the interest of the majority of our citizens to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Penrose, for clarifying. And I think there had been some history that a lot of conversations were driven through the mayor, and council members had the opportunity through city council reports at that time to ask and get some type of consensus upon people to put it on the agenda. I'm certainly open to doing it in a different fashion. I did notice you had mentioned some of the cities with new business. And if you look at the new business, it was more of new business of an agenda item that had a staff report and it was a regular thing. So for example, if an item was continued from another time, that was old business. And many of the things that we've talked about tonight, the first time we saw it, that's a category of new business. You know, I'd be open to having something that said where an item and it was a recommendation, because I did go back to some old council minutes and meetings, and most of the time it was put by the mayor on there, and it would say it was an item with no staff report to it, and it was something someone brought up to see if there was any chance in discussing it further before a lot of work was done outside of whatever was planned before. So I'm open to having that discussion and having an item. Other council members have some comments on that too, but thank you for your remarks.
So how did this item get on the agenda tonight?
Are you asking me? Are you asking me the question?
Yeah.
I brought it up at the last council meeting, despite the fact that there wasn't really a time for me to bring it up.
Yeah, but you brought it up during council reports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really, there is no provision for me to be able to do that. I did it anyway, because I thought it was important.
So, and I think your written prepared statement had one inaccuracy, and that staff placing items on an agenda. And because it's who is allowed to ask to place items on an agenda? Well, we're all allowed to ask. I'm allowed to ask. That's how this item got here. You're allowed to ask. We all asked. We brought it up. That's how this got here. That's how the next agenda item got here. I'm also open to amending the process, but communicate, if somebody in the public wants an item, something discussed on the agenda, they can talk to a council member, can email, phone, we can work, not everything has to be worked, live at a council meeting, right? So if there are issues in our community, we do volunteer work, we go out and say, hey, Rick, can we work on this thing together? Sure, we will. Or if there's a real concern, we can have a discussion and approach the mayor and say, I think I want to put something on the agenda, and staff would prepare a report. So my point is, more or less, our process today works. It got us this agenda item on the agenda. I got the next agenda item on the agenda. I want to hear from the community and all of our constituents. And a speaker earlier tonight mentioned freedom of speech and his point of view that the council has wandered and that we ought to get back on track. I think we need to hear that, but there's also the mechanism we're using tonight to have this discussion got us to this discussion because you said, hey, you know what? I want to have an agenda. I want to add an agenda item, and we added an agenda item. So it doesn't feel broken per se. And the flip side concerns me that if we have always can always add a new item to the agenda, we can end up with massive agendas. And I think our last meeting went very, very long, and we got about half of our work done at the last meeting, and didn't even get through the whole agenda, let alone being able to add new items to it. I want to hear new items. I will, where do we get these ideas? I get phone calls, I get emails, I get stopped at New Leaf and Safeway, and if I hear concerns, I'll deal with the city manager, and sometimes they never rise to the level of a council meeting. Sometimes they're bigger, and we can, during council reports, say, I heard from somebody in the community, and at a future meeting, I'd like to discuss X, Y, or Z, and not surprise staff, but let staff then prepare a report on that, and then come back to council with that. And your comment on that we set policy, of course we do. Our staff is fantastic, but our staff does not wag the dog. That is not going on here at all. They do excellent work to prepare us for these meetings. We all have lives in and around the community, and they give us staff reports that inform us and give us the tools we need to set policy for the city. So I am a strong supporter of staff, and I think those comments were a little rough. I think our staff is really fantastic. So I'm okay to talk about amending the process, but my main point is the process worked to get us to this item tonight, and if we need to tweak it, we can tweak it, but more or less it worked.
Councilmember Mueller?
Yeah, I think it's been my experience that you do have to have confidence in the city manager, and you have to have confidence in the mayor, and we will elect the mayor every year. So it's not like the mayor is sitting here for 4 years. So I think that's very important to understand. And I have a memory that we have accepted public comments, which is freedom of the speech that the speaker was concerned about, where we've directed staff to address that as an agenda item in the future. So it's not like we neglect that. And we did get together all in January, and we looked at all of us, and staff worked very hard with us to set our mission, our goals, and our strategic plan and our priorities for 2015. And if we want to deviate from that, then that's going to be taking a lot of resources and staff time away from the work that we presented to them in January when we all sat together with the facilitator. Those are just, a couple of concerns I have. I think we have to be careful not to put agenda items on that are rumors. Of the 17 speakers 2 weeks ago, every one of them just about got up and said, well, rumor has it. Rumor has it. That's not the way to govern. You don't govern on rumors. I think you have to govern on facts, and I think we've been very fair about that. And the continuous discussion about open government, I've never had a backroom deal. I don't know where that's coming from. Everything is copied and printed. And just because the majority of the council has voted in a different way of the minority of the council, if you want to call it that, you have to remember our democratic system is set up where, you talk to Anna Eshoo and Jackie Spear, they wake up every morning and never win a vote. But that does not mean they don't continue to support government. Or like us, that doesn't mean we're not going to continue to support whether we agree to disagree on a vote. And I don't think we've punished anybody because of the way we vote. It's not my experience. When I've been elected, I represent all the people, but yet I still have to make a decision on what is best for the community. I don't have a specific segment of supporters that I'm going to vote their direction. I have to vote what's best for the future of the city, and I think our legislators in Washington, D.C. Have that same feeling. It's not like just because they don't win a vote, they're not going to get up and support the federal government. It's like us not getting up whether we agree to disagree on an item. So I think that's just the beginning of the discussion. I think the key is that if we want to put more on staff, I'm sure if there's an important agenda item, if you go to the mayor or go to the city manager, I would hope they would support the council's decision because the city manager works for us all. So I think that's an important discussion to have too. And I talked to other cities in the county also the last couple of days. And it's a very slippery slope. We have to be careful that we have the resources and the time to look at future agenda items. I think our job is to get business done as efficiently as possible, and we're all working towards that. So I know there's a lot of speakers that will not agree with me tonight, but that's kind of the way I'm feeling right now. I'm not opposed for new agenda items, but I think we have to consider the resources and the staff time we have to do these things. So that's just the beginning of my comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Reddick.
I'd like to hear what the public has to say on the item first.
All right, we'll do that on speakers. We do have 10 of you here. You get your 3 minutes, but if you're repeating what another one is, if you were thoughtful to everyone in the room to condense it, that would be welcome too. But otherwise, you do get your 3 minutes. And we'll start off with Mr. Sofer, followed by Shirley Hawley.
Good evening again, council members. So how did we get here? What was the road that we got here with? As I see it, in June of last year, we gave the city guidance, the voters. We voted, and as I told you a while back, when the voters vote, they speak for the sovereign of the United States of America. So the sovereign spoke to you, both elected and appointed servants of the city. You heard it, but there was no reaction, either by the appointed members or the elected members. In November of last year, we spoke again, and we gave you direct information as to what to do. There was silence by the city. They didn't respond. Nothing happened. And about a month and a half ago, we came to you and we said, you are negligent in your duties. You are not performing the way you're supposed to be performing. And we expect more, we expect better. All of a sudden, things started happening with the bridge. These were the 2 votes that I'm talking about on the bridge. I'm just giving you the bridge as an example of what the problem is. The problem is when you get direction, when you get instructions, you sometimes don't respond, and we're not happy with that. And so we think that there needs to be more two-way traffic. There needs to be more input. There needs to be more on your part. You need to hear more. And possibly by letting every member of the council agendize items, you may find that there's things out there that you ought to be listening to and responding to. And I think that's how we've gotten here. That's the way I see it anyway. I'm sure there'll be other people that have different points of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sofer. Shirley Hawley, followed by Harvey Rohrback.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Shirley Hawley. I have a rather special position. I've only recently committed myself to understand better what goes on in our city government. So my impressions, you know, are kind of fresh. I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not representing any other citizens group or anything. The issue I want to speak to is whether items shall be added to future agendas at the request of a citizen. Response by the staff misconstrues the request. I never said I wanted a citizen to, quote, set the agenda. I never said that. I just want to have more access to the city council. That's all, as an individual. I do want somehow to have access to agenda contents, and probably it's in the form of new business, probably. Dr. Penrose was the first one that mentioned that. I thought it was a good idea. I haven't talked to her about it ever since. Why would I want to do that? Because I want to be part of the democratic process, especially if I have a concern that I would like the council to be aware of, or if I believe an important item is being delayed and overlooked, and I gotta say, it seems like that's happening. The background provided by the staff misses the point in several ways and confuses what should be the addressing of a simple request. Dealing with a citizen's request to add an agenda item by requiring a quorum response is an unnecessary roadblock to citizen participation. If I have a concern that I take, say, to Rick, and he supports making it an agenda item, shall it really be necessary for him to get a quorum agreement to put it on the agenda? And how about Deborah Ruddock? Can she easily get a quorum vote for an agenda item? It's not looking that way. This making of a big deal so that an ordinary citizen has trouble placing new business on the agenda is an example of how come the last meeting involved so much shouting and anger. Please look for ways to make communication easier, not more convoluted. Thank you.
Thank you. George Muta, followed by Frank Garrity.
You said me next. Okay, go for it. Go for it. Okay, thank you. Harvey Rohrback. I'm a proud member of the Advocates for Open Government, and contrary to what Councilmember Mueller just said, this is an open government issue. The mayor is a single person. The city manager is a single person. The head of a department in city government is a single person. Any one of those people is, by policy, allowed to put an item on the agenda. The highest 2 vote getters in the city council history last time are not allowed to put an item on the agenda. It's just not democratic. We're not saying that just because they put an item on the agenda, it has to be voted in their favor. But for God's sakes, why don't they let them have their say as elected members of our city government? I'm a director on the Coastside Fire Protection District, and our policy is very clear that any single director can put an item on the agenda. I highly urge you to make it city policy that any single council member has the right to ask for an item to be put on a future agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, George Muta, followed by Frank Garrity.
Good evening, George Muta. If I understand this correctly, there is no policy currently that exists. There are habits, there is history, but there's no policy. Let me state that as an individual, I have really 2 opportunities to say something or to be heard. One of them is through the election process. And each one of you were elected, all 5, individually and collectively. As such, you represent the constituency, the voters of Half Moon Bay. Whether they voted for you or not, it doesn't matter. You're all elected. Therefore, each one has, in my view, an obligation to the public that you serve, to listen to the public, and if something comes along that you feel as a council member, as an elected individual, is in the interest of Half Moon Bay and the voters of Half Moon Bay, that you have the right individually, not 2, not 3, but any single council member has the right and the obligation to put forth a matter on the agenda. Now, there are a couple of issues here. First of all, it could go one of 2 ways, pretty much. Somebody puts something on the agenda, nobody else likes it, that person gets it there, they raise the issue, they say their piece, everybody is quiet as a church mouse, next thing you know, the gavel comes down, next item. Well, okay, you had your shot. The other side of that is that the member that places the item on the agenda says their piece. Before you know it, one council member asks a question, another one makes a comment, there's discussion, there's engagement. Before you know it, there's a vote, and some item is voted up or down. There's no loss there. It's a win. So to not have it that way, I mean, honestly, it almost looks like what would the majority be afraid of, to have a problem with one person bringing something to the agenda? It just doesn't make sense. That is our only way, aside from November when we vote, to make a comment, to make a statement, to get through, to try to make change, afford change, and affect change. I would also suggest that this matter be thought through, because what this town tends to go back and forth like a pendulum, and it's because there's some real animosity. And it's unfortunate, and there's a huge divide, and that's unfortunate. I'd rather see the middle. I think the middle is a much better route. But those that are a majority yesterday may not be a majority today, and those that are a majority today may not be a majority tomorrow. So you might want to consider those things on this matter. I feel pretty strongly about it, and I don't see any reason why it can't be accepted for any individual council member to agendize an item. How you implement that, that's your business. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Frank Garrity, followed by Doreen Garrity.
Frank Garrity, Silver Avenue, again representing AFOG, and I'll be pretty quick tonight. I strongly encourage the council to adopt a policy that allows a single council member to add an item to the agenda. By reading the staff report, it seems that there was much confusion on what was requested. All that was requested was the ability of a single council member to add an agenda item. The single mayor can do it, who is a council member. We do not, with all due respect to Mayor Frazier and whoever's mayor at the time, we elected council members who then elect a mayor to serve for a year. The single council member mayor at the time can add an agenda item. The single city manager can add an agenda item. A single department head can request the single city manager to add an agenda item. Now, the public elected each of you. That means that a majority of the public trusts each of you to represent us on many important decisions. I'm confident that we, the public, can trust each of you to add an agenda item. That does not even bind the city to anything. It merely brings an item into the public discussion, and that is open government. A city manager or a council majority blocking something from being discussed publicly is closed government. Please, tonight, vote for open government by adopting the policy of allowing single council members to add agenda items. Thanks.
Thank you. Doreen Garrity, followed by
Good evening. My name is Doreen Garrity, and as I've said in the past, I'm part of the group Advocates for Open Government, and AFOG members believe in open and transparent government. I have a great concern tonight that the most basic of rights that we as the community are supposed to have, namely that our elected representatives, Council Member Penrose and Council Member Ruddick, can actually represent us in our local government despite them being in the minority. That basic right is being able to agendize an item that their constituents want agendized. The city council members are the servants to the community. Therefore, you do represent us. You do not represent yourself. I do not see any logical reason as to not agree and approve a policy that allows one city council member to add an item to the agenda. This only makes sense and appropriate under the Roberts Rule of Order and Democracy. If this policy is not approved, it could appear that the city council majority are trying to block representation for all their constituents. Where's the transparency and the accountability to all the citizens? If the city manager has the authority to agendize a topic at the request of a department head, then why can't one city council member agendize a topic? Why does the city manager or a department head appear to have more power and authority than our individual city council members? I'm looking forward to this policy to being changed immediately tonight and to allow individual city council members to put an item on the agenda. Therefore, all the citizens of Half Moon Bay will be represented equally. Thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy Benjamin, followed by Pam Fisher.
Good evening, council members. Nice to see you again. I'm Jimmy Benjamin. I live at 400 Pilositos Avenue in Half Moon Bay. I support the proposal, but I feel it's important to point out that every governmental body in the United States acts through parliamentary procedure. It may not be the Robert's Rules of Order version of parliamentary procedure, but it's a form of parliamentary procedure. I'm holding the Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure up here, and it says a couple of things, but the key principles that I want to call to your attention are the equality of rights. All members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. So each of you has the same authority under parliamentary procedure as any one other of you to add items to the agenda. It doesn't mean you get to carry the day, but you get a vote. And the reason for that is that the public gets to find out how you felt about the item. If the item doesn't make it to the agenda, the public doesn't get to know what you think. And that's why it's really important. The second is that the rights of the minority have to be protected. If the item doesn't get up, then the 3 minutes that some member of the public or the number of public members that get together isn't going to be sufficient to raise a nuanced issue. A member who's sitting on the die has more time. And if they can't raise the issue, the only way the public gets the nuanced story out is through a big rain dance, an initiative. It's really hard. Finally, I'd like to point out, with respect to the specific ability to place items on the agenda, that a government body under this code cannot delegate any discretionary powers to any other persons or group, not even to a committee or a subset of its own membership or officers or individual members. They can do ministerial or administrative duties or powers that do not require the exercise of discretion. There is very little in your authority that is more an exercise of discretion as to what items get voted on. We have a charter, we have bylaws, but those two documents cannot contradict these basic democratic values. When I served for 7 years as a planning commissioner, for 2 years as a chair of the planning commission, we heard many people who brought items to us. We heard their items, we agendized their items. I encourage you to pursue that aggressively in your approach to governance during your term. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam Fisher, followed by Luciano Arruda, and then Mike Ferrara. And that's all the cards I have on this item.
I'll spare you. Pam Fisher, a member of AFOG. Kudos, Dr. Penrose. Excellent, excellent preparation. And you hit every item that is critical. The eloquence of the previous speakers, I'm not going to sit here and repeat what they have said. The point I will make is not one of you has the right to censor any of your other council members. And essentially, that is what's happening if you do not allow a single council member to suggest an item be put on the agenda. This is not up for a majority vote. This is an individual council member's right to their to represent the people that put them where they are now. You have no right to censor any of you, any one of them, any one of the your council members. That's it. You're all equal. You all have the right to put an item on an agenda.
Thank you. Luciano, followed by Mike Ferrara.
Okay. So I'm Luciano Arruda from Hauser Lane in Half Moon Bay, and I came here to support, Deborah Penrose on the request to have individual council members to be able to agendize an item for the meetings. I think that's an easy thing to do. I think that the arguments against it are mostly based out of fear of the unknown. Well, what if there's 200 items? What if, the citizens are going to take over the agenda? This is all, fear of the unknown. So I think the most reasonable thing to do is to try it out. Give it a shot for 6 months, 3 months, and it might work out, and you guys come all as, winners. So I don't think it's that hard to do it. So if you're willing to consider, I think that would be a great step towards open government and towards democracy and everything else that we believe in. So that's my comment, and good luck voting.
Thank you. Mike Ferrara? And thank you, everyone, for your brevity tonight, too. Appreciate that.
You had to say that before I spoke, huh? Good evening, Mayor Fraser and council members. It was my experience during my term on the council that we were supposed to try to attempt to have comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y. Not that we could always achieve it, but we should attempt it. And the state rules basically were that the mayor and the city manager work on the agenda, and that the mayor tries to represent the wishes of the council, whether you agree with every council member or not. And not every request for agendizing could be met, because sometimes it required a workload that just wasn't available at that time, and it might have to wait until that was there. or the agenda item, according to the attorney, might have to be altered into some other form to be brought forward. But the whole business of proscribing discussion on certain items is something that crept into city government. I think it was in 2007. We used to half-jokingly call it the Brady Rule or the Grady Rule. But really, I do think the council would be well advised, especially since, you know, there's different outlooks on the council, to try to not get to the point where items are prejudged by having a majority of the council not wanting to talk about it. It's better to get it out and discuss it, or to work with the requests from various council members to try to get it into the form that it can be discussed, et cetera, or within the workload. I think that's how the system is supposed to work, and I would hope that you would try to direct yourselves there. Thank you.
Thank you. So bring the item back to council. Thank you, speakers. And Councilmember Reddick, we need to hear from you.
Yes, I support Dr. Penrose on this issue very strongly, as you know. I don't see any reason why I should not be able to ask and have placed on the agenda an item I believe is of concern to the citizens that I represent. I'm not elected by district or by special interest groups. I'm generally elected. I have to serve all the members of our community. And I'd like to point out that the staff report tonight actually did not address the concerns expressed at the previous meeting. We did not ask, you know, to investigate whether citizens can put items on the agenda or whether staff could or the city manager. The question was, can an individual council member place something on the agenda? And it's not addressed until the very last sentence in the staff report. Oh, by the way. So, you know, right there's an example of sort of, I believe, an attempt to bury the issue and to drown out our voices on procedural issues. And, you know, I didn't fall off the artichoke truck yesterday. I spent 12 years on the city council from 1991 to 2003. Prior to that, I was a citizen activist. And I can tell you the history of Half Moon Bay government is the history of sort of repeat hardballers, if you will, power players. It was all about, this is our town, we're in, you're out. We count to three, blah, blah, blah. So the notion that this just might be some sort of bureaucratic slowdown, in my mind, is BS. We have a history here of power playing, and when that happens, what happens is the citizens respond with initiatives. So they're going to get their voices heard, you know, using other, you know, instruments of our democracy. So I can tell you that if I feel like I'm shut out of this process, then I'm going to use what tools I can at my disposal, you know, outside of City Hall. And other citizens will do that too. So I think the best thing we can do is to have open, transparent government, build it into the agendas, have what Deborah pointed out was a council requests item, let a council member suggest an item for a future agenda, and if the council wants to vote on it then and there, that's fine. That's open and transparent, and everyone can see what's going on. The idea that we have to go to somebody at City Hall outside of meetings and beg, plead, and steal to get something on the agenda is not open and transparent government. And frankly, I haven't had, you know, a great record so far using the, you know, just go to City Hall, out of sight, out of mind practice. So I support Deborah Penrose, and I would like to hear a motion suggesting the action to take, the policy to make, and I will second that.
Well, a couple of things here. I can tell you, when I first came on the council and you had just gone off, the most repeated phrase I ever heard, you can't get on there, you have to count to three. And that was the rule. That was apparently a general city's rule. And that happened all the time, and that's because you had to count to 3 in order for something to be done. I think you've heard just preliminary comments from the council tonight, and just the fact that Councilmember Penrose got this on here because people agreed to do that. You know, I'm open to having, you know, a separate line item on there, but it was a practice. It wasn't a policy written down, but it was a practice since 2003. And the only other person that got to put something on there, and I looked through some old agendas. In fact, I'm glad he's here tonight. It was former Mayor Ferrara. He was the one that got an item on there himself. No one else had done that. So it was a practice. You've brought this up. I think everyone's listened to this, but I think you can see the process had worked because a couple of people had said, yeah, we're interested in it. So now is the time to establish a policy. I'll let someone else speak for the moment.
So, key issue here is communication. The word censorship came up, but it's really about communication. Look, let's just talk about the elephant in the room. There's I don't want to use the word divide because it's wrong, because it's not a divide. I think there's not enough communication. My phone doesn't ring off the hook from the people in attendance tonight, nor have I ever received an email, with the exception of Mr. Benjamin, whom he and I are going to share a little Kehoe time soon. But nor have I received an email about, hey, Rick, I'm concerned about this. If you want access to Councilmember Kowalczyk, contact him. I always respond, except for the gentleman who's the racist. I don't respond to him. But other than that, I have open access, and we all do. We all have email, phone numbers, all publicly available. The question was around more two-way traffic, more two-way communication. Again, communication. It came up during general comments for some of from our staff work, and we're doing that. I think it's working. Opportunities to be heard are many. And they're at the council meeting again, but anybody can contact us to share your thoughts. And some of the best places, we know when I'm out in the public doing volunteer things, I hear great stuff. The 2 highest vote getters in the last election have the same right to put an item on the agenda as any other city council member. We have equal rights to do that, exactly equal. We can suggest it, we can get a quorum, and it can be there. And if you don't, well, then communicate some more, and we'll get there. So I think that process works. I'm comfortable with that process, and I'm going to make a motion. I move to have an item placed on our agenda for. I move to have an item placed on future city council agendas where we can suggest an item for consideration, and if a quorum is achieved, for it to be scheduled at such time that staff can properly prepare the item for discussion.
Councilmember Penrose, since this was your item you brought up, does that sound right to you?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. The quorum vote, I have a little bit of trouble with. I would like to have more consideration given to the first part of what you said. That is, if a single council member, me, Marina, John, Debbie, Rick, has an item that they believe the general public takes very seriously and cares a lot about, and there are enough people in our community that care about it, that council member ought to be able to place that item on the agenda without a quorum vote.
So you'd like to be able, each council member should be able to place an item on the agenda for consideration?
Yes.
Is that succinct? Does that sound right?
In point of order, you have a motion that does not have a second. Is that correct? Can you put your microphone on? Point of order, there's a motion made and there's discussion which is not legal. It needs a second to have further discussion, so I will second the motion at the moment for discussion purposes.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion that you've seconded is Mr. Kowalczyk's motion that a quorum be needed to pass the request.
If I'll restate, so two elements to that. One, that we have an item on the agenda, a regular item added to our agenda, because I think that the two items, this item and the next item, were brought up during council reports, which, to your comments earlier, felt like an awkward spot because it was a forced fit in there.
Yes.
So my suggestion is that we have an item on the agenda to discuss, whether we call it new business or whatever we call it. There's a stopping point, items for consideration, council requests. And then for those items to be discussed, and if there's a quorum, so that's the first part. Second part, and if there's a quorum of the council in support of that we direct staff to schedule at a future date, at which time a staff report, that we give them time to prepare a staff report, and then we have that agenda item. That's my motion. I also see that as I'm looking for middle ground, is what I'm also trying to do.
I'm not sure how you see that as looking for middle ground. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think that we successfully put two items on the agenda from discussion. I think we want a more formal stopping point to be able to do that, creating that and the point for that discussion, and also make that our policy. And again, I'm looking for middle ground. It still has the quorum element to it, but it also it's full open to discussion of the topic.
Councilmember Mueller.
Yeah, I think the key is it will give everyone an opportunity to place an item on the agenda, number one. Number two, do I want all of us to put an agenda on there to save the elephants in Africa? Then I think we have to vote on that and say, well, that's kind of far-fetched for staff to figure out how many elephants we'll save. So I think the maker of the motion is in the right direction, that we've listened to the public, we're giving everyone the opportunity to step forward to place an item on the agenda, and I think it's a fair way to go, that we would listen to everyone's opinion on how important it is from the public's perspective and the elected's perspective to ensure that would get on the agenda, and that's my position on that.
Has something not gone on? Have we not given something fair consideration and given it an agenda item? I mean, so
yes.
Well, it's rhetorical, but
yes.
Okay. Well, yeah.
So, in essence, what we're asking here is to put an item. Every council member to be able to have the ability to put an item for council consideration. Yes. I mean, that's it. That's it.
Yeah, may I ask the city attorney, I think there was appellate cases regarding the same thing we're discussing. Is that correct?
No, I'm not aware of an appellate decision addressing this. I really think it's a policy decision for the city council. To the extent that wasn't clear from the report, my apologies, but this is really a matter of how do you believe it's best to conduct city business.
Well, along this line with the motion and the second, if fellow council members feel that, that there's this hostility up here by other individuals, then maybe I recommend that we bring in an expert just for the council and key staff members to visit on if there's a conflict resolution to work it out. I don't feel it's that way now. I want to hear what agenda item you have, but I want it to be realistic. I don't want it to be some gossip or rumor in the community, and that's why I would support the quorum issue of it. Because with the technology now, the information that's being put out there is not truthful, and we all know that no matter what business we're in or wherever we're out there, because you could get yelped by just doing something, selling the wrong colored pumpkin to somebody, you know what I mean? So I think you have to be careful that it's a realistic item, that realistically staff can handle, and that's why I think we would be more than open and fair to discuss whatever council member wants to bring forward, in my opinion.
Councilmember Ruddick.
Madam Mayor, did I hear correctly that you would support an alternative motion that basically just said that any council member can place an item on the agenda under a council request item on that agenda without a quorum?
I would like to ask the maker of the motion if we could make this as simple and clear as direct the motion, and that is any council member can suggest, I said it right the first time, any council member can request an item on the agenda for consideration. As brief as that. Now, if someone brings up they want 10 elephants in the middle of the room, no, we're going to say, there's going to be a vote to say no. So I think that part is implied for the action to go on. You would vote for that. So you'd bring up something. I want to hear about this. Anybody else? No, no, no. Okay, that's it. It's done. Move on.
So you're saying it's implicit that if it were an outrageous request, that the council could then vote to deny if they so choose?
It would be, yeah, you have to have your quorum to get the item, get a staff report, get it be a full-blown thing. So right now, it's just an item to bring up on the agenda for consideration.
I'd like to say that I am making this motion for the protection of all of us. It's not just for me. It's not because I don't feel I'm being heard on the council. I am saying it because I think it's the right way to do business. I think it's the right way to bring issues to the council table. And to imply that I would ask to have 10 elephants enter the room, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. I'm 72 years old. I had 25 years of schooling. I'm a community member that's well respected. I'm not going to be bringing outrageous proposals to the council. I wouldn't make a fool of myself that way. So.
And with respect, I was not insinuating you would do that. I'm just saying we have to be realistic of what we couldn't get done. You know, because we did set our priorities in January, we all agreed to that. And do we throw more things on the pile after halftime? That's the only thing I'm discussing. We have to be realistic. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, and I don't want to spend till 3 o'clock in the morning on council nights here because I've decided to bring items to the agenda. That was not the issue at all. Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second, and we have a request for an amendment to that motion.
I don't understand the amendment. Can you clarify?
I just am requesting to have it really simple that any council member can put an item on the agenda for consideration. I'm asking him to amend it.
And by consideration, there would be a discussion, and through that discussion, we would direct staff?
Correct. Correct.
How is it different? How is that different?
It's just real short and brief.
Now,
if the maker of the motion decides I would rescind my second, then from that motion.
I'm not sure I like the wording of that. I mean, I think the original wording that any council member under the council request item on the agenda can ask that an item be placed on the agenda, on a future agenda, rather than, I wasn't quite following your amended motion.
I was just trying to make it brief. City Clerk, could you read what Rick's original motion was? And maybe that's just fine. I was just trying to make it brief.
I'm probably going to muddy the waters at this point, but as I understood Councilmember Kowalczyk's motion, it was that a regular item would be added to our existing city council agendas that would be either new business or city council suggestions for future items. And I understood that you would then vote as a body whether that item would be directed to staff and brought back for future discussion. So I'm not sure that I got the discussion correctly.
That sounds right. I just wanted the wording to be cleaner.
If I could offer a thought that just occurred to me. The notion of an individual council member adding an item to the agenda, I think gives rise to the possibility of that request being contravened by a majority of council members at that meeting where the request is made by motion. So notwithstanding the Capitola City Ordinance that says individuals can add items to the agenda, a concern just occurred to me that what if that occurs and there is a motion by the City Council that's approved by a majority of council members to not add the item?
Well, that's the democratic process, and it happens in an open public meeting so that people can see that items are being suggested and items being either accepted or rejected. That seems fine to me.
I guess my point is simply that it's two ways of getting at the same thing, is that if a single council member can ask for an item to be agendized, it can obviously, that request can be vetoed by a majority of council members at that same meeting, right? But, or otherwise, if it requires a quorum in the first instance, then that has, this, you end up with the same result. So it's just food for thought. You can do it however you want, but you end up the same place.
I'd like to amend my motion. The motion as stated, with the amendment of for a 6-month period, so we can pilot it and revisit this item in 6 months.
So the motion being that any council member can request that an item be placed on a future agenda under a new regular item on the agenda, and absent the language about a quorum.
No, that was not my amendment. My amendment was my motion with a 6-month trial and bring this item back for discussion, and we can see how it went. Did we have a free? Were council members feeling they had open communication and open ability for that to work for them? And if it wasn't working, we can change it at that point in time.
Okay, please restate the motion.
Okay. I move to have to place an item on the regular agenda wherein a city council member can suggest an agenda item for consideration at a future meeting, and if a quorum is achieved of support for the item, for it to be scheduled at such time that staff can properly prepare the item for discussion, and for this to be in place, for this to be revisited in 6 months to at which point we can assess its effectiveness. The point being, at that time, if it's working, if it's working, we're good. If it's not working, we can change it.
I will second it for discussion purposes, and I think, City Attorney helped me on this, but I think you got to be very, very careful when individual council members ask for an agenda item for potential Brown Act violations. We got to be very careful. We try to be very careful amongst us already. But when an individual council member, I don't know, maybe I'm outreaching too far. I'm just trying to protect all of us.
I guess I don't see that as a Brown Act issue, particularly if the request's made by an individual. I did raise that issue in regard to a quorum of council members giving direction outside of a regular city council meeting, but from an individual member standpoint, I don't see the Brown Act issue there.
Well, I want to bring it up to clarify it because, the public is going to talk to me, and then I could maybe,
I'd be more worried about agenda discussions outside of the meeting. Like, for instance, how does the city manager know when she has a quorum interested in placing something on the agenda? To me, that's a gray area, but I think having this out in the open, is open and transparent and would avoid those sorts of conflicts in general.
So through the mayor, real quick, just for my own understanding of kind of the direction that I'm at least on the motion that's going on that's out here right now is, so it sounds like the motion is to put, add an item to the regular city council agenda that says new business. And under that, council would discuss publicly here what items they would like to hear in a future council meeting. And then there would be a vote on placing that in a future council meeting. Am I hearing that accurately?
I don't want the word new business used. I like the phrase of items under consideration.
But the process?
Or council requests.
Council requests, something like that.
But the process?
The process would be direction to staff from the council to put an item on a future agenda.
Under that item, Deborah Penrose or any of us could say, by the way, I've been thinking about this or talking to people, and it seems to me like an issue that I would like to see us addressed at a future council meeting. And according to the motion and second on the table, that would only happen if a quorum of the council agreed to do so. And then an amendment was made that this would only be good as a 6-month pilot project.
Okay.
That's my understanding of, is that correct?
That was my understanding too. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here.
In your example, and I too, like your prepared statement, believe we're all here with the right intentions, with good intentions for our community. And in that example, if Dr. Penrose brings up an item for consideration, I don't know why I wouldn't support. It's very reasonable, right? And I think maybe that's a 6-month window in which we can build some trust and move beyond this.
Yes, I think we can trust each other to behave like adults and not patronize each other. That would be great. That's a goal.
Well, then that might be for a professional to come in and visit with us if you think we're patronizing. I've never thought of that as a patronization. I'm thinking about a respect for your opinion.
I think trust and treating each other like adults and building trust go hand in hand. So we have to be careful about the language we use, our posture toward each other, and to demonstrate as much as we can mutual respect in our communications. I believe we can do that without a facilitator. I know we can do that without a facilitator because we've done it. We just need to make it a habit.
6 months trial.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? What roll call on this?
The 6-month trial is in there, correct? Yes.
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 Vice Mayor Palchik?
Yes.
Mayor Fraser?
Yes. Good, thank you. It's 10:22, just we've got this one other item, and we will not continue it tonight. We will, oh. 5-minute break?
Or 3.
3-minute break. We're going to 3-minute break. We'll be back here at 10:27. Go. We are on item number 10, and this is discussion of, Chapter 2.18, Sidewalk and Tree Maintenance and Liability of the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code. And we will hear from our attorney.
Yes, this should be a much shorter item. Let me just sort of paint the picture of how we got to where we are, and then I'll introduce the ordinance. Well, I'm not going to introduce it. I will discuss the ordinance. So as you will recall, in 2007, the city received the judgment in the Yamagiwa litigation and later settled that case for $18 million. And the timing of that litigation was rather unfortunate in that it shortly preceded the recession, which particularly in regard to transient occupancy tax, but other revenue sources as well had a major negative financial impact on the city of Half Moon Bay. And in that context, following those occurrences, the city council and city staff were really in a position of facing potential and the very real potential of insolvency, which included discussions of Chapter 9 municipal bankruptcy and disincorporation. So at the time, there was a real effort to identify any way to conserve city resources. And as I recall vaguely, there was within that same time frame one case involving a sidewalk trip and fall that resulted in a claim brought against the city that was settled for the ABAG plan policy deductible limit of, I think, $50,000. So in light of that, I brought to the attention of the city manager at the time that the city of Santa Cruz has an ordinance that requires property owners, or rather places upon property owners potential liability for the failure to maintain safe sidewalks. That was based on a City of San Jose ordinance that was the model for similar ordinances that occur from throughout California. They're common, although certainly not. I'd say less than a majority of cities have adopted such ordinances. So from a legal standpoint, state law, since the Street Improvement Act of 1911, has placed the obligation to maintain sidewalks on the adjacent property owner, not upon the city entity. And the 1911 Act provides that a property owner with frontage along the public right-of-way has an obligation to maintain the sidewalk and planter area in a safe and convenient, so that passage is safe and convenient for members of the public. But the failure to do so doesn't give rise to liability on the part of the property owner. What it does is it gives the city the ability to notify the property owner that the property owner needs to repair the sidewalk, and in the event that he or she fails to do so, the city can use city resources to fund the cost of the repair or the replacement, and then recover that cost as a lien against the property. And in 2004, there was a reported appellate decision involving the city of San Jose in which the court said that pursuant to the authority that's contained in the state 1911 Act, which is in the Streets and Highways Code, cities can adopt ordinances that extend the property owner's obligation to maintain the sidewalk, to make the property owner liable to the public for injuries caused by the property owner's failure to do so as the state law requires. Before the 2004 case came out in the city of San Jose, case law had held that in the absence of such an ordinance, the property owner would not be liable. The duty to maintain the sidewalk was a duty that was owed to the city, as in the city government, not to individual members of the public who may be injured as a result of a defective sidewalk. So we offered that to the city. It was adopted by the city council unanimously in early 2011. There was an article about the ordinance in the Half Moon Bay Review, but it didn't receive much public attention. And then more recently, it has come back to the city as an item and generated quite a bit of public interest. So the ordinance itself is a policy decision of the city council. There are certainly good arguments that can be made both for and against having such an ordinance, but really that's a policy decision for the council. So I'm happy to respond to any questions from council members or comments, but otherwise that will conclude my report. Thanks.
I have a quick question, staff. Through the ABAG insurance policy, if the city was to pick this up, I've heard anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 would be our piece of the liability.
I believe as part of our plan, it's $50,000 deductible. So if there's any general liability claim, it's a $50,000 deductible. I can verify just to make sure, but that's what I recall. I haven't touched it in a while. But it would be the deductible, it's the $50,000 deductible, and then whatever happens with that claim, depending on that amount, the following year, your rate that you pay for insurance premiums, that goes up, depending on the amount of loss.
But that's included in our overall ABAG insurance policy for all kinds of things.
That is correct.
Thank you. Council?
Yes. Could you please explain to the council and the public the city's authority under our existing code to place a lien on your property or your home if you do not repair your sidewalk?
Yes. Yes, I touched upon that briefly. That's the same authority is in the city's municipal code that mirrors the Streets and Highways Code provision that I mentioned. And what that says is that, it places the obligation to maintain sidewalks that front on private property on the adjacent property owner. If the city receives a complaint or notice that a sidewalk is defective, or if the city, as a result of an inspection, determines that a sidewalk is defective, then it can notify the property owner and request that the property owner perform the repairs within a certain period of time. Then if the property owner fails to do so, then both the city ordinance and the state law give the authority to the city to hire a contractor to go out, repair, or replace the sidewalk at city expense, but then to recover the cost of that repair from the property owner as a lien on the property. So that's the authority that's contained in the municipal code. It mirrors the provisions of the 1911 Act.
And does the city have a program to regularly inspect the conditions of the sidewalks located in its right-of-way?
No, it doesn't. That's certainly an option for the city council to allocate city resources for that purpose. That's certainly some direction that the council could give.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the public whenever you're done with your question.
Any other questions right now? And it's 10:35. We have a stop at 11. Can the council extend it to 11:30? We have 9 cards here, so they'll take 20 minutes or so. So let's try to get this wrapped up by 11:30. Are we offering to extend?
Actually, I'd like to have us consider, when we discussed this at our council retreat in January, the city manager said that we would discuss this issue in the form of a public workshop. So I was very surprised to just see this added as an agenda item. So I would like to suggest that we take public comment, but I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to notice and convene, publicly notice and convene a workshop on the sidewalk and street tree maintenance and liability issues. Promote the heck out of it, do a lot of outreach. This is a very, very serious issue for people. I think it was pretty much #1 during the campaign when I was going door to door. So this ordinance that we have that foists liability on the public and makes them responsibility for repair was done in, I think, 1 or 2 meetings. I don't recall any notice. I think this issue is important enough that it deserves a community discussion. So I'd like to see us take public comment and then continue the item to a public workshop devoted to this issue.
That could be a possibility. This could get decided and cleaned up tonight. I can just say from my past experience with this, when we created this, we never thought about sidewalks until, we were scratching for every dime and nickel and, got rid of staff. didn't go to meetings. I mean, we were cutting $5,000, $10,000, and that's when it came up that we were one of the only cities in California that still took on all responsibilities for sidewalks. So, and with the city being a deep pocket, that's one of the easier things for someone to trip and fall. So that was one of the things that were cut. Ike, we're in a completely different situation than we were 7 years ago. So if this can get decided tonight.
I still think that this is an important enough issue that it bears further discussion. Like, things may have changed, people might have softened their positions, but I don't know, it still seems like a teaching moment, but maybe I'm wrong.
I'm open to a workshop, but if this can get done, why delay it? Yeah, and let's hear from the public and see what we got going tonight. So, so when I have agreement, we're going to 11:30?
They can be brief, hopefully.
Okay, going to 11:30. You've got the half an hour. We got a half an hour to discuss. George Muta, followed by Frank Garrity, and yes, Doreen Garrity. I'm going to mix up your cards some night.
Yeah, stick somebody between them. George Muta. I remember this very well. The city attorney has laid the background and the foundation out extremely well. In fact, I remember at that time, things were so tough. The council was so concerned and frankly frightened. I think we all were. It was that serious. I remember Marina even asking about the pocket parks that we have throughout the city, you know, like in Frenchman's Creek or Casa Del Mar, can we, you know, move the liability from us to them? And so there was a lot of creativity and a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts and just trying to reduce expenditures because it was that bad. I think the way that it ended up was pretty lousy. And I think there's an awful lot of people agree with that. And the first victim of that was Lisa Kramer, who lives in Casa Del Mar, had just bought the house, hadn't even been there a year. Realtor did not tell her or advise her of this item. And lo and behold, somebody falls and trips, sues her for $300,000. I mean, that's a lot of damage for a broken arm, really? And ended up settling for the magic number of 100, which was her deductible. That was what the insurance company covered. So, gee, what a coincidence. And you guys are mentioning 50,000. My idea would be, or my thoughts would be, if you built it, maintain it. It's yours. And what that would lead to, and there was a lot of really kind of shaky stuff going on when this item went through. And I remember, you know, gee, let's bring somebody in from outside. We'll get a group rate, and we'll run around and check sidewalks. But you didn't bother to run around and check them to see their condition when you pass the liability off. And this is not just sidewalks either; it's trees too. But I see if you take this liability back, I can see in the future a potential desire to relinquish this liability again, which then seems to me to be assessment districts. Okay, I built that sidewalk, I'll take care of it, but if you want that house, you're going to build that sidewalk, and anybody that moves in next to you is going to finance that sidewalk, and now you've got your assessment district. That would be one way for you to get around the liability issue. But to abandon the sidewalks and the trees that the city is responsible for, that the city put in place, and put that burden on the public, I think that's a pretty rough road to hoe. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank Garrity, Doreen Garrity.
Frank Garrity, Silver Avenue, again representing the AFOG, and I'm doing that because this is an open government issue, and it's open government issue because of the way it was implemented several years ago with very little to no public notice or discussion. So we really appreciate that you're discussing it, and thank you for discussing it and hopefully resolving it tonight in the way it should be resolved. Anyway, the staff report has made this all about costs, which is just laughable. The city seems to be flush with cash right now. This council just approved millions of dollars in bonds to fund the new library. And by doing that, they've approved $250,000 to $360,000 per year in operating and maintenance costs for that library. This council just approved $400,000 to replace MacDutra Park when it could have been repaired and upgraded for maybe about $100,000. This council's been spending $70,000 to $100,000 a month on consultants for the general plan. That's been going on for over a year. So I ask, how much would it really cost to reinstate the sidewalk maintenance program? I'm guessing it would be minor compared to the costs I've just mentioned. But it's also about more than just cost. Having a single professional entity of the city maintain the sidewalks would keep the quality and safety and appearance consistent throughout the city and throughout neighborhoods. If every home or business owner maintains their own sidewalk, there will soon be a mismatch of materials, colors, and textures. Much of the work would be done by non-professional homeowners using the cheapest materials and quickest methods they could get away with. And if they don't do it themselves, they'll hire the cheapest contractor, maybe unlicensed, to do the work, again, in the cheapest, quickest way they can. That's how I'd do it if I was paying for a job that I didn't really care about. I also worry about injuries. If a person gets hurt, they're forced to sue their neighbor. This pits neighbor against neighbor. Not a very nice environment for a small town. And then I ask, what if a homeowner or a business owner does not have insurance? So it brings up the point, will the city eventually require homes and business owners to carry insurance, just as the state requires us to carry auto insurance? Finally, the entire justification for it seems to be just because we can, when you read through the laws and this and that. Well, people and companies and agencies can do a lot of things just because they can. They can do a lot of rude and inappropriate, even unethical, immoral things, but they don't because it's not the right thing to do. So again, I ask, do the right thing, take back responsibility for the sidewalks. Thanks.
Thank you. Doreen Garrity, followed by Jimmy Benjamin.
Hello, my name's Doreen Garrity. In 2011, as you stated, the city, in our opinion, the City Council snuck in an ordinance that reduced the city's liability for its sidewalk and made the citizens 100% responsible for the upkeep and improvements of its sidewalks. The community did not know about this ordinance until an unsuspecting poor homeowner was sued when somebody was injured in front of her house. Why did it take this unsuspecting homeowner to notify the citizens of Half Moon Bay? Where was the transparency and accountability when the City Council voted in this ordinance? It's time to reverse this ordinance. The city can't say they don't have money. I'm always hearing how strong financially our city is. I'm not going to repeat all the projects that Frank just listed. We basically have the same list, except he did exclude one item that our city is spending money on. It's an unknown amount of money for liability insurance for the skate park, for the new skate park. So we're taking that liability on also. So it would be interesting if you asked the citizens of Half Moon Bay what projects they would like to see their money spent on. What would the citizens say? Have you asked the citizens what they would like? And if so, how did you reach out to them? No one's asked me once how I want my money spent. The city dumped deficient sidewalks onto the unsuspecting citizens just a few years ago. Why should the citizens be 100% responsible for the repair and maintenance? The city should be 100% responsible for the repair of these deficient sidewalks that you dumped on us. Once the sidewalks are deemed safe by the city, then perhaps the city and the citizens can split the ongoing maintenance. The city needs to pay, though, 100% of the liability insurance, which should not cause any problems since the city has now deemed our sidewalks safe. Passing an unfair financial burden onto the citizens, who some are barely holding on financially, it's just wrong, especially when our city is spending so much of our money on projects that some may not think is necessary. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you. Jimmy Benjamin, followed by Pam Fisher.
Thank you. Good evening again, council members. Still Jimmy Benjamin at 400 Palacios Avenue. I have a couple of concerns about the current the current policy. And I understand that it was done at a time when we were scrambling for nickels and dimes, as the mayor pointed out. However, it does seem to me that we have created a disincentive for homeowners to accept a sidewalk, essentially. Perhaps we could force them if the general plan zoning for some development said, hey, you got to put a sidewalk in as a condition. But where we don't have existing development, we are creating a disincentive for people to say that, because they'll say, hey, I don't want to have to take ownership of that. I don't want to have to do that sidewalk. And in fact, I have seen coastal development permits for single-family dwellings go in without the sidewalks being constructed. And I don't think that is in the public interest. Moreover, I know that there's been work for street trees in the downtown area that took place before this, and I don't know, maybe that was completely funded by the property owners, but I'm guessing that that was city money. So I have some question about, again, there's no allegation here, I don't know how it was funded, but if it wasn't completely funded by the property owners, then I have an equitable sharing question here. It seems to me that as a result, it's going to create an inhibition of the citizens being able to enjoy sidewalks. And moreover, when the citizen does do a repair because they want to do the right thing, they're not really sure, how big a crack does it get before it becomes a liability? Perfection of a surface is an abstraction, right? So it's going to take an expert to know whether it's time to do the repair or not. And if the city expects the homeowner to do it, any construction project of any magnitude that poses a public threat is going to need what? A permit. And how many of our citizens get permits for the work they do on their houses? How many do you think are going to get permits for the work they're going to do on their sidewalk? And the expert inspector that comes out is the same expert who's capable of inspecting the sidewalk to begin with, to prevent the inequality that I'm so concerned about with. For all these reasons, I think it makes sense to institute a citywide street maintenance, sidewalk maintenance, tree maintenance program. And I also agree that the liability creates the incentive for the city to expect high standards of performance from the staff that perform the inspections. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam Fisher, followed by Harvey Rohrback.
Pam Fisher, I'll be kind again. Most of what I wanted to say was covered. Looking at the existing program, the city actually needs to, this is a question Councilwoman Ruddock brought up, the city is the one that needs to identify what is or is not safe sidewalk. Homeowners become accustomed to small irregularities, that an unknown pedestrian, a new pedestrian, or an elderly person might end up tripping on something that the homeowner never even noticed. So the issue, this just seems to have been such an unfair policy with an unfair amount of notice to the public about it. I have a sense that you may be looking at going back to the city doing the job that the city should be doing, and that is inspecting sidewalks, repairing sidewalks, and having sufficient insurance to cover the liability. And that is really what I think the majority of people sitting here would support.
Thank you. Harvey Rohrback, followed by John Ullum.
In the interest of time, I pretty much agree with what everybody has said. I think it really is a question of fairness, and I think the city should certainly take back liability for sidewalks and trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Harvey. John Ullum, followed by Sarah Polgar.
Okay, everybody's pretty much said it, and Mr. Condotti laid it out really good. This ordinance was basically a test case that was advocated then by ABAG to run out there and get every city in their insurance pool to do this. They hired a lawyer and they put together a roadshow. That roadshow, I don't know if it came here, but I can tell you the difference between how city councils act and treat their people. The roadshow went to American Canyon, and at there, the lawyer explained, just like Mr. Condotti did, and although he said it much better, he says, change the words San Jose to American Canyon, and you have a statutory scheme that's bulletproof. And that was the whole justification he gave and explained, or not justification, but his explanation of how easy this would be to do. Their city council members discussed it for quite a long time. Whereas in ours, I went and looked up the minutes of the meetings that were prior to it, and I finally found the meeting where it was done at. Mr. Condotti put together a nice presentation. Some guy got up there and said his 3 minutes worth against it. 5 minutes later, it was the law. That's how much discussion you put into it. Whereas the American Canyon City Council spent a lot of time discussing it. They asked questions like, how would this affect residents in their city? How would this affect people who could afford to maintain their sidewalks versus people who could not afford to maintain their sidewalks? The lawyer did his best to talk them into doing it. He pointed out that American Canyon was a 20-year-old city. That meant they had 20-year-old trees. That meant they were going to have problems. Now was the time to do it. The responses from their city council were a little bit different than ours. One city council member pointed out that this was a can of worms that we're opening up for our the citizens for those very reasons. Some of them might not know about it, some of them might not have the insurance, some of them just might not have the money to go replace that sidewalk. And my favorite was Councilmember Mark Joseph, who should be running for higher office, said, just because I can offend the community with little or no effort doesn't make the medicine go down any easier. He was referring to how easy it was to pass a bulletproof scheme to dump liability onto the citizens of American Canyon. Now, I know that there was a financial problem back then. Everybody in 2011 had financial problems, not just this city, and I know they did up in American Canyon too. I hope you will consider that when you decide what you're going to do tonight, and that you will take into consideration this lesson in all of your decision-making in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Folger. And I have a card with no one's name. Does anyone want to speak? Like at dealer's choice here? All right. It's gone. Luciano, do you want to? All right, then.
Hi, I'm Sarah Polgar. I live on Poplar Street, and I would strongly support all of what the previous speakers have said. I'm not going to reiterate it. I will give you a personal story of how it's affecting one of your residents. I happen to have what's designated as a heritage tree in front of my property. I really like it, but I will say that when we purchased the property back in 2005 or 6, it had already been hit by a drunk driver, limb went off, it's cracked at the base, so it wasn't doing so hot, but as part of a stipulation for our building permit, we were told that we could not cut it down, not that we wanted to, but it was part of the stipulation. So in good faith, we've been maintaining it, had it trimmed for a good $300 last year, and it just lost a limb in the high winds this past week. In the past, of course, the city at least would come and remove the limb. It's lost limbs before. It's, as I mentioned, wasn't in great shape when we got it, and but of course, the city won't take care of that, and I think that it's really bad policy. Just spoke with a tree guy today. To deal with it was at least $400. So, this is really poor policy, and I strongly urge you to reverse this ordinance. I think that clearly we want to have a community with sidewalks and nice trees and everything, and already you're seeing bad things happen when you foist this liability upon the public. I just strongly urge you to take that into consideration and reverse this bad policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Luciano.
The guy with no name. So Luciano Arruda from Hauser Lane. Yeah, a lot has been said tonight. I'm going to be brief. My thoughts are that it's not just sidewalks, it's trees and bushes. I don't know what else that could be in the way there. So not so simple. And I also think that the decision to give the responsibility to the residents that was done before was based on a budget concern. And there's no budget concern right now. But maybe there's somewhere in the middle there where, if you build a house, you're responsible for the sidewalk. Maybe there's a middle ground, and I think that suggests that we should talk more about it. Don't make a decision in a hurry when you can make the right decision, a month later. This has been a long time already, this ordinance of residents, paying responsible for the sidewalk. So take a little longer. I suggest that you follow Deborah Ruddick's suggestion. Have a public forum, get more information, find areas where you can find exceptions, and make it work with a budget that makes sense for the city. Don't overextend the city's budget, but make it fit.
Thank you for your comments. I bring it back now to council. Thank you again for consolidating your remarks. Council, who wants to have a comment?
I have a comment.
All right. Council Vice Mayor Kowalczyk.
Thank you. I too will try to be brief, but I may not be. I want to state the obvious because I think it's really important. This was a particularly difficult chair and position to sit in during the time when the city faced financial insolvency. We very nearly, in my opinion, were among the first cities in the state of California to potentially go bankrupt, and we didn't. And we made all kinds of decisions that, in hindsight, ended up being smart decisions because now we are on good footing. This was one of them. This was unpleasant. Didn't want to do this. We needed to protect ourselves at every angle, and if we could save $5,000, we were doing it. We did it all over the place, and that was the rationale for doing this. And I think the comments, I can understand. Some folks said things. Oh, you snuck it in. There was no sneaking. It was done with that purpose. And I invite you to continue to attend council meetings where these things happen. And there is no sneaking. But I understand the interest in turning this around. And our position is different today. I want to understand the financial implications. Different ideas appeal to me. I want to understand what the financial risk is from a liability perspective, and I want to understand different models. What's the best practice for maintaining sidewalks? In the community I grew up in, it was different than what we're talking about here. The families, the property owners were responsible for their sidewalks, and that community did a bulk purchase. So if they would inspect, and if you had something that was out of compliance, you would pay. You could either do it yourself, you hire a contractor and do it, or you could pay the city to do it. But you paid. I also would be open to something, to all of this, and/or even matching funds, something like that, for property owners to maintain their sidewalks. I will say that I think our involved citizens. So my gut says that to use our community as a resource to inspect and monitor the sidewalks, so that perhaps on a first-come, first-served basis, we have some matching funds available for sidewalk repairs, and that's something that we can support. And I'm not making a hard statement because I really want to discuss it, but those are some ideas I'm open to. But I wanted to give the background that it was not an easy decision to go here, but it was a way to protect our city, and I think we're in better shape today. I also don't want to undo everything we did because I don't want to get ourselves into a weaker position either. So I want to be very thoughtful and pretty careful. I don't want the pendulum to swing wildly the other direction, but thoughtfully we should consider that.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes, I don't think we have a staff report tonight that allows us to make an adequate decision benefiting the public. I think we have to have a staff report. Ideally, I'd still like to do a workshop, but if not a workshop, then we need a staff report that identifies options in terms of maintenance. Maybe it's we pay for it all, maybe it's cost sharing, but what are the options in relationship to maintenance and the pros and cons? And then options regarding liability. Can we buy a separate umbrella policy in addition to the ABAG pool that might, help with some of those costs? Would having a sidewalk inspection program reduce our tort liability? Just a lot of those different kinds of things. We need a staff report with options. We need to bring back the actual ordinance itself and have that as an attachment to this, so we can understand what we've done and what we need to do to make changes to our policy. And I believe we must make changes to our policy. And in fact, I think the way things are going, ultimately we may be forced to. Caltrans now has a policy of complete streets. Many states have now adopted complete streets policies. So a street is no longer just a street. They now recognize that the street includes the street, curb and gutter, maybe it's stormwater, treatment like grassy swales, sidewalks or paths, but it's the whole thing. And the whole thing is the public right-of-way. And the city or the county is responsible for what goes on in that right-of-way. And if we want a walkable city, if we want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and treat streets in a manner where we're not just focusing on cars, but also people and pedestrians and cyclists, we have to take a different approach. So I know that New Jersey, the New Jersey Department of Transportation recommended a complete turnaround in their policy of having, citizens responsible, adjacent property owners being responsible for sidewalk maintenance and liability. They completely turned around and recommended that jurisdictions take back liability and that they either share or take back the responsibility for maintenance and do it with inspection programs. So, and Atlanta's considering an ordinance in the past year changing that policy. So, what might have been great policy during the Great Recession, people are now starting to take a second look. And a lot of it is being driven by this whole concept of livable, walkable, communities. And so I think we need to have brought back a set of recommendations and options and have those options evaluated along with the ordinance. And I think we need to make it a notice public hearing and do some outreach around it, because I'm not prepared to give direction tonight. I know what direction I'd like to give, but I don't feel comfortable doing it without adequate information from staff. I know they can provide it. So my motion would basically be to direct staff to bring back more information at a future meeting so that we can evaluate options and make responsible, both fiscally and in terms of public service decisions.
If I can follow up on that.
Can we hear from other people, or do you have a direct thing?
So important.
Your direct thing you want to follow up with? Yes.
I agree. So I would support having a study session and have staff prepare different options and best practices for us to consider.
Thank you. Councilmember Muller.
And I think it has to be included in there. You have 40% sidewalks that are not paved in the city limits, I believe 40%. So how do we deal with, am I wrong in that number, Acting City Manager?
It's my understanding, I believe, that 40% of the city has sidewalks and 60% does not have sidewalks.
I had it backwards. So that's number one. And I think more important, I think we have to remember, we do have a fiduciary responsibility to our citizens also. I don't want us to just keep thinking we can take on things that we can't afford in our budget. We have to look at the budget issues that we'll be discussing next month too. And I think that definitely should be included. And also retroactively, what are you going to do? You're going to go back to individuals and say, oh my goodness, we owe you money. I will say it was publicly noticed. There was no hidden agenda in the process. It was in the newspapers, I believe. We have documents of all of that. So I think this is your first opportunity to have something put on the agenda.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that when we do ask staff, when we direct staff to bring us more information, that we get some real cost considerations. What does it cost to put in so many feet of sidewalk? What are you talking about when you're talking about a sidewalk? Is it asphalt a sidewalk, or does it have to be concrete or whatever other material? And the cost for maintaining that sidewalk, and also the consideration of trees. And what are the costs of replacing trees, maintaining trees, all of those things.
I have a couple of things, and thank you everyone for your comments. And just to go back to what people said, this was not as many decisions years ago. They were not easy to make, and we were cutting and chopping. Entirely different place now. Someone said we're a mishmash of streets. We certainly are, and some of that's by choice. There are many people that do not want a sidewalk, do not want curb and gutter. But then the rains come, and then they do want it. Now, on Kelly Avenue is a good example. We had got some grant money because it is a main thoroughfare to the beach, and there was grants, and we were able to sidewalk, curb, and gutter the front half. A lot of those people didn't want that. And the people, and we only had money for the first half, and the people down below weren't interested. The rains came. I got a lot of calls. People want sidewalks and curb and gutter. I think you have to look at it through neighborhoods. So there is a lot to discuss. Some people don't want them. Some neighborhoods, it's their character, it's their charm. They park on their front lawn. Alsace-Lorraine, there's no sidewalks. When you talk about a walkable community, you're walking in the street. And that is some people's choice to do that. I think we do need sidewalks. But because this, I want to make a suggestion, and this could be in the form of a motion too. So I think we're in agreement that we want to take back liability. Can we just do that right now? Because this is going to be a complex issue.
You may direct that an ordinance be prepared to repeal the chapter, but you can't take action on that because that would require an ordinance.
Okay, that's what I'd like to suggest now, because if we talk about workshops, we talk about gathering things, it's going to take a little while. And in the meantime, something could happen, and if this is our direction that we really want to take on the liability, let's be able to do that at this point. I'd also like to suggest that since we are coming up to budget soon now, let's allocate some funds to this now, so we can study, get feedback from the community, who does want a sidewalk, who doesn't, and maybe there's a priority, maybe there's a cost sharing. There's all kinds of questions about that. But that could take 3, 4, 6 months to get all that together. So if we could, in some way, if council agrees, to get a liability, to take on that liability now, can we do that? Yes.
I'd be comfortable having, taking back the liability, soon. And I actually think that we could probably deal with the cost of repair and all that stuff. I think we need to separate that out from the city's streetscape policies. That's a much longer process. I think we could deal with liability and then, maintenance costs and that sort of thing pretty quickly. I think the other stuff, neighborhood design, streetscape design, that brings in stormwater and a whole lot of other things.
Exactly.
So
That's
I would
what I was
rather see
concerned.
that on a separate track.
Yeah.
If I may, through the mayor, just real quick, just thinking about just the street maintenance, and if we're looking at that, the liability is one issue, the street maintenance and how the city would take that over. There'd still have to be an extensive audit of our current, sidewalks and all that, and that would probably play in. It wouldn't be just, tomorrow we couldn't just implement it. We'd have to do the sidewalk audit and see exactly what is going on.
And that's why I was suggesting putting money in the budget to get that start going.
Yeah, and I'm just talking about policy, right? I'm not saying, now we're going to repair it with these materials. I'm saying that, something that says it's the policy of the city that the city takes back liability, and we will share the costs of sidewalk repair or pay the whole kit and caboodle, whatever it is. But I'm talking about the higher level policy decisions. I think streetscape design is separate. I think the issue of materials, the idea of having an inspection program. I think we can, reduce our liability by having, getting things up to code and then, inspecting it, having a regular inspection program. I got to believe that's going to reduce our liability over the long term. So that's another policy, but
I'd be happy to comment on that. You're right that having an inspection program would reduce the city's exposure to I mean, assuming that you decide to repeal the ordinance that that requires property owners to share in that liability. If you had an inspection program, that would enable you to limit liability so long as the city is committed to allocating sufficient funding to correct sidewalk defects when they are observed. Because if you do a comprehensive citywide inspection and identify defective sidewalks, that places you on notice, which is an element of liability for dangerous conditions of public property. One of the things that the law requires is that the city have actual or constructive notice of the dangerous conditions. So just want to caution you that if you want to consider adopting and budgeting for an inspection program, you should be prepared to also allocate the resources to follow up and fix defective sidewalks when they're identified.
And yeah, you're right, that could be a huge expense, but we'd get some idea. But you had mentioned in order to, an expedient way to pick up liability, you're suggesting that an ordinance come back to us?
Yes, and that can be, it's a very simple ordinance to prepare. It would not, it can be brought back next month if that's the council direction. In the meantime, what we would try to do so that you have the information is identify from the risk pool from the ABAG plan what the likely impact would be on your liability premiums, if anything. I don't know what the answer to that question is. I think that information might be useful to you. And then just as, additional background information, my recollection is that sidewalk claims against the city have been very rare over the past few years. So we've tried to quantify that for you as additional information. But in general, they're fairly infrequent.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Kowalczyk?
Yeah, so I think we should bring that back, but I definitely will not be in a position to make a decision on that until we look at the financial implications. I think I agree conceptually, but I have to look at the financial component before we decide.
And that would be brought to us with the ordinance, the staff report, how much this would cost.
We'll provide what information we can learn between now and then.
All right, so does staff have enough information on that?
If that's the consensus of the council, I'm happy to take direction based on that.
Heads nodding on this? Yes, heads nodding. Great. Any other items? That's the last one. 11:15, Earth Day tomorrow. Bring your bucket, get some compost and a plant. Thank you. Good night.